Stop, Friendly Fire. Chapter 52 to 53. Chapter 52. Wars Scenario. Shin Woo, Shadow Joker. He who begins to resemble Mana, 24 others. LV8. Status Effectiveness 300%. Strength 4255, Agility 4505, Health 4308, Magic 10545. Passive Skills. Soul Strike. Max, Combat Sense. Max, Wildcard LV5, Acting LV21, Invisible Heart LV4, LV209, Rebellion LV8, Mana Acceleration LV9, High Rank Mana Bone LV9, High Rank Command LV9, High Rank Assimilation LV8, Lucky Strike LV7, Soul Seeing Eye LV6, Manatization LV7. Active Skills. Disguise LV9, Instigate LV9, Bone Reinforcement LV12, Rule of Bone LV11, Bone Armory LV11, High Rank Regeneration LV5, Sacrifice LV1. Elements. Darkness. Max, Light. Max, Fire. Max, Intermediate Dark Shadow LV3, Intermediate Annihilation Flame LV1, Beginner Shining Flame LV7, Intermediate Dark Flame LV7, Beginner Fire Shadow LV8, High Rank Water LV4, High Rank Wind LV3, High Rank Earth LV3, High Rank Metal LV4, High Rank Ice LV1, High Rank Acid LV4, High Rank Lightning LV6, Absorption LV15. Resistances. Holy. Max, Darkness. Max, Light. Max, Fire. Max, Beginner Shining Flame LV1, Intermediate Dark Flame LV1, High Rank Water LV3, High Rank Wind LV3, High Rank Earth LV4, High Rank Acid LV3, High Rank Ice LV1, High Rank Lightning LV5. 23,613, huh. It was just a joke, but if things go well, I think I can really get to level 9. What do you have to do to get your stats to rise by the thousands? Who knows? It just comes naturally to me. Following the battle, Shin Woo had returned to the Metal Army base. His loyal subordinate, Aram 290, presented the Sunspear General's bone to him, and he then re-examined his stats. Compared to Sigald's bone, the Sunspear General's wasn't anything special, but it leveled up his water resistance and element, which he seldom used, causing his magic to increase significantly once more. Even if it's rotten, it's still a herring. Or, even if he's just an extra, he's still one of the 4 heavenly commanders. But Shin Woo, are you really okay with just absorbing others' bones all willy-nilly like that? That was a huge problem for you before. My shoulders hurt a little, but this much is fine. Honestly, it's just a scam. I can just fool the world into thinking that I'm the legitimate owner of this karma. That's how it works. Jin couldn't understand him and just tilted her head, but to Shin Woo it was a simple matter. It was unclear how the world perceived a legitimate owner of karma, so as long as Shin Woo fooled the world into thinking he was that legitimate owner, everything would be fine. So I can just kill the heaven-sundering general, Leofield von Terriman. Is it really that simple? His dark shadow lets him distort order. That's right. To put it bluntly, Shin Woo was using dark shadow, which reversed cause and effect, to act like a gangster. If he'd gained this power earlier, then he would have acted like a swindler even earlier and plunged this world into chaos. How will you handle all that karma? Think about it this way. Just put it back before you get caught. Stop. It sounds like you're a high school girl sneaking out of the house in her older sister's clothes. Shin Woo joked around with Jin and was greeted by Kracia. Once he was done giving her a progress report, Kracia immediately rushed outside and was mesmerized by the sunless underground night sky. There had always been a slight presence of light, even during nighttime. But now that the artificial sun was gone, it was completely dark. Now, morning would never come for the underground, like it had been when the first residents of the underground empire had come. The sun's gone. The yang energy has dwindled, but in exchange, the yin energy has gotten even stronger. It's great that I've gotten stronger and all, but the emperor and the archmage probably got stronger too. Shin Woo knew he couldn't have allowed the sun to remain, especially because Sigald had fused with it. Despite that, he couldn't help but worry. He was worried about the powerful archmage, Theotain von Seldin. Even so, Shin Woo had destroyed his physical body twice, and was especially worried about the Emperor, who he assumed to be at least level 9. If those two's darkness was further strengthened, then could Kratia even do something against them? Unlike Prince, Kratia didn't want to be useless. As always, she was being really disrespectful towards Prince, and furrowed her brow in anguish. Her helping Shin Woo study the Titan may have been good enough, but that wasn't enough for her. Now that it's come to this, I studied the Titan and gathered plenty of data. And because of you, Shin Woo, I've gotten a grasp on innate elements. Maybe it's time for me to change too. She'd prepared herself for this, but she hadn't taken the plunge. So, in a way, it may have been for the best. It was better for her to throw away her pride as a magician. While she was making a huge decision, she suddenly overheard someone speak. It truly is dark. It would usually brighten around now, like the surface. Though I haven't known about the surface's brightness for very long. Dana? It was Dana, once the princess of the Underground Empire, now an immortal. She, who should have been in the Spirit's spring training with the spirits, had shown up in a one-piece outfit and was heading towards her. In that short period of time, she had seemingly fully adjusted to her body, as she seemed much stronger than before. When did you get here? I came right over once I heard from the hero. I believe the hero was going to call me if the situation worsened. As Sarah had pointed out, Shin Woo had prepared several cards for Sigald. One of those cards was the squad stationed in the Spirit's Spring. Because Shin Woo had formed a contract with the Spirit's Spring, he could create a gate to the Spirit's Spring anytime, anywhere. Thus, he could call over more personnel, surpassing the gate's limitation more quickly than usual. Dana had been prepared to jump into the fight against Sigald if necessary. But as you are well aware, Shin Woo hadn't needed Sarah, let alone Dana. It truly is dark. I've never seen such darkness, even when I was strapped to the heaven-rending cannon in Byron. This is the first time I've seen such a thing, ever since I was born. Yeah, it's scary since it's so dark. I'm not scared at all, since I now know that there's a true sun on the surface. Contrary to everything she'd learned, the surface was very different from what she'd expected, and she was deeply moved by what she'd seen. The underground was changing so quickly due to the machinations of just one man. And regardless of how events progressed, the Underground Empire would soon meet its end. What would happen to her then? She thought about it and then smiled bitterly. She dare not think about it. After all, she hadn't expected that she'd be sublimated into a greater existence, an immortal. The hero must have some sort of scenario mapped out already. Everything will go as he wishes, and I have no complaints there. On the contrary, seeing such exceptional ability from the man I love causes my heart to pound. But how much can I really do on his stage? Can I really help him? Coincidentally, she was thinking along the same lines as Kratia. Shin Woo was so talented that they felt stupid for pledging their aid. Kratia, who had no idea what she was thinking, tilted her head at Dana, who was vacantly gazing at the sky, and asked, "Are you sad now that your fiancé's dead? Or did you want to be there when it happened?" "Pardon? Fiancé? Ah, you're talking about Sigald. I'm not sure. I regret not being able to sock him in the face, but we weren't close enough for me to feel sad over his passing. He was my fiancé in name only. And I also have someone I love." "You sound like the main character of a romance novel," Kratia said, dumbfounded, and Dana looked askance at her and repeated, "You seem to not have any dreams. It must be because you're a magician. Most elementalists are pure and have a wild imagination. Everyone carries a story within their hearts. It's just that my story is a romance." "Then what about Shin Woo?" "Shin Woo's an elementalist too. I heard there was a darkness magic book on the surface made of human skin." It sounded more like a book a demon would carry around, rather than an elementalist, but Kratia could understand completely. You can appraise someone so calmly, yet still like them, huh? He's extremely cruel and not considerate of others, but he also cares for us immensely. I like him, but sometimes, I think he spoils us too much. I don't really get it. His heaven-defying general persona's really cool, but I think he'll need to study love a bit more. Kratia always thought he'd been the prime candidate to practice on. If he, a mere skeleton, was able to draw the affection of so many women and form such complicated relationships with them, then he would be really helpful in her understanding of love and human feelings. If Shin Woo had heard her, he'd probably be really mad. Persona, you were both out here? Oh, it's you, Sarah. Dana was somewhat perplexed at Kracia's speech, as she spoke as though she wasn't human. But then, Sarah appeared at such perfect timing. She floated over to them and then looked at the night sky, which had once occupied the two's attention. The Empire will soon disappear without a trace. You know that, right? Yes, somewhat. Were you perhaps thinking about what your role was in all this, Sarah? No. As long as the Empire perishes, I'm happy. Since it's no time to be worrying about our methods. I don't care if Shin Woo uses me as a chess piece or puts me on his stage, so long as he destroys the Empire. You were thinking quite lavishly, it seems, Dana. Sarah wasn't concerned with Dana's petulance or her puffed-up cheeks and just said what she wanted to say. Her attitude had changed so dramatically that it was hard to believe that just a short while ago she was praying for the dead. If you have any unfinished business on this curse-ridden world, then you should deal with it before everything ends. Oh my, I should get going. What about the hero? It's just you, Sarah? Dana's cheeks puffed up even more. Sarah, feeling her gaze, smiled as if entertained, and turned around. At that moment, Shin Woo entered the chatting channel and was met with Lloyd HK. Celine is. Shin Woo, Celine's been captured. We have to go and save him. Shin Woo. Oh, no. What sad and surprising news. What an obvious trap. Moreover, there was an idiot right here who wanted to go headlong into that trap. A signal for battle had been lit in such an unexpected locale. Lloyd HK. Shin Woo, Celine is. Shin Woo. Senior, I get it already, so please don't cry and take your time. Arian Ruparte. We've been anxious lately since Redidane disappeared, but... Shin Woo. I'm sorry. You're the one who's suffering the most. Shin Woo. No, it's fine, so please go ahead and explain. Wait, why would he suffer from Sarah's death? He urged them to get to the main point whilst tilting his head. Then, Arian continued, as if she understood what he was thinking. Arian Ruparte. Anyway, we've been really anxious lately, but all of a sudden, Celine Viesa came into the channel. Shin Woo. He did he? Shin Woo checked, confirming that Celine was still accessing the chatting channel. However, he wasn't talking, likely because he was in a situation where he couldn't. That meant he wasn't dead yet. He was really surprised since he expected Celine to be dead already, but he pretended like he wasn't. Wait a sec, what is this? Huh, that's hilarious. More importantly, he didn't want to believe it, but he felt like something was off with the chatting channel. It wasn't the normal chatting channel. Contrary to Shin Woo, who was feeling a bit anxious, Arian calmly continued with her explanation. Arian Ruparte, but I think he encountered one of the 12 generals. I don't know which one he met, but I believe he's been captured. He's been imprisoned. Shin Woo. One of the 12 generals, huh? Shin Woo thought about which of the 12 generals it could be. Lloyd HK. Those damn undead. To think they'd take Celine hostage. Shin Woo. I see. So he's been captured alive. I wonder why they've taken such a merciful approach. How shocking. It was so obvious what was going on. Shin Woo's acting ability couldn't handle their stupidity and he let his insincerity slip. Arian noticed, seemingly more anxious than before, and yelled desperately. Arian Ruparte. We know how shocking it must have been to lose Sarah. However, Shin Woo, we would appreciate it if you helped us. We can't just leave him out to die. He's your junior, someone who greatly respected you. Who lost who exactly? He was shocked because of who? Their delusions had run this rampant during the time that Shin Woo and Sarah were out of touch. Shin Woo was astounded and remained silent, but then Lloyd continued where Arian had left off with a loud voice. Lloyd HK. If we work together, we can take down one of the 12 generals. We have to hurry. It'll get even harder if he calls for reinforcements. Shin Woo, help us. Arian Ruparte. Shin Woo. Both seniors asked seriously. Shin Woo closed his eyes in thought. He already knew what to say to these incorrigible idiots, but he wanted to organize his thoughts before doing so. Lloyd HK. Shin Woo, if we work together, then we should be able to save our comrade from certain danger. Shin Woo. I'm sorry, but They were about to try persuading him once more, but then Shin Woo firmly said. Shin Woo. I can't go right now. I'm sorry, but it looks like you'll have to give up on Celine. Please don't go anywhere. I'm sure you already know about the underground sun, yes? Lloyd HK. Shin Woo. Shin Woo didn't even reply and just left the chatting channel. He then checked his mana radar and sighed deeply. He'd hoped that he was wrong. Then, Sarah and the rest of his party trickled in. He only called Sarah, so why were all of them here? He tilted his head and asked, Sarah, I want to ask you something. What is it? Can a person use the chatting channel to affect another's mana? In other words, is it possible to use darkness mana to find the other hero's location or info? In response, Sarah sported a strange expression. It was as if she was saying, I never even thought of that. She looked straight at him and said, What's with you all of a sudden? You know that the chatting channel is a part of God's domain. Yeah, I thought so too, but I sensed darkness mana within the chatting channel. Isn't that strange? That's right, that was the main source of Shin Woo's uneasiness. What's worse, he felt an attempt at a forced connection in order to figure out his location. He'd led that mana to an entirely different location, but it wouldn't have been possible had it not been for his maxed out darkness element and dark shadow. The chatting channel is a domain comprised of God's mana, so how could another person's mana interfere with it? That's extremely hard to believe. But if you sensed it, then you're probably right. It seems like you were able to control your mana as you please within the chatting channel too. Sarah was well versed in Shin Woo's abilities. She'd felt it was strange and thought about it, furrowing her eyebrows, and then said, This has never happened before. If it did, I wasn't aware of it. I could have asked Ethan Cruz if he were still alive. That really makes me feel sorry for myself. He ignored Sarah's sarcastic remark and heard Kraisha's cautious voice. Shin Woo, the fact that they've intruded upon God's power means that. Yeah, if we make a mistake, then no new heroes will be summoned. So, we have to end it. I don't think I have to worry about you two, but just in case, Jin, Kraisha, don't go into the chatting channel. While he was at it, he sent Prince a private message telling her not to enter the chatting channel. Fortunately, he wasn't too late and she obeyed his warning. Prince Altania. Celine Viessa? He's already dead to me. As expected of a veteran hero. Prince was busy exploring dungeons on the surface, so she didn't have the time to come down and save Celine. It was quite fortunate actually. Celine Viessa was likewise already dead to Shin Woo as well. If Celine Viessa had brought the darkness mana within him by entering the chatting channel, then he was playing in the palm of their enemy's hands. It was already too late to even consider saving him. Did Arian and Lloyd not realize this? They probably didn't. They were unsure if they could even take down the weakest of the 12 generals, yet they wanted to save him? It was all just hot air. Prince Altania. Lloyd'll probably trust in his abilities and try saving him himself. He's probably cursing at us too. I'd be happy if that's all that happens. Prince Altania. We weren't originally good friends, so it's not surprising. Still, Junior, Lloyd's in danger, isn't he? Yes, Shin Woo replied honestly. The battle had already begun. Their foes had succeeded in hacking into Celine's hero abilities and were attempting to track down the other heroes, so it didn't matter whether the two heroes went to save him or not, they were in danger. They're in incredible danger, as they have no way of stopping the enemy from tracking them down. Of course, they won't be caught immediately, as they're still quite far away. Prince Altania. But if the Archmage himself goes, then. I threw them off their trail too, but it shouldn't slow down someone skilled enough to hack into the chatting channel for very long. Prince Altania. Prince was dead quiet. Shin Woo could easily tell how she was feeling and smiled bitterly. Why are you being so honorable now? It's not like you, Prince Altania. You're one to talk. Even I have a sense of shame, okay? I know how much you've helped me and I know that I'm leaving all the tough stuff to you. The fight between the surface and underground. He's glad she knew. Shin Woo nodded his head and said, So what are you getting at? Prince Altania. Well, Junior, can't you save Lloyd for me? Is it too much? Is it impossible? I can't believe you're actually asking me that. Prince Altania. You told me to ask. You told me. I'm shocked. There's a limit to how brazen you can be. Prince Altania. Hey, it really was fun playing around with her. it was fun talking to her. He felt the stress from those idiots, Lloyd and Arian, wash away and took a deep breath. And then he said, "I'll try. Don't hate me if it doesn't work. Since I'll bring you Lloyd's bone." Prince Altania. What's the point of bringing me his bone? I don't like bones, you know. I'm being really generous here. I guess you don't know me that well. Prince Altania. Jr. Despite his small talk, Prince's voice died down. Since she knew just what she was asking of him. Prince Altania. Thanks. Aside from the bone issue. Thanks for everything. So just relax and clear the dungeons, Senior. Prince Altania. Don't die. You're not allowed to die. I don't die even when I'm killed, so don't worry about me. After he was finished, he stood up. Everything was looking at him, but they already knew what he was going to say. If he was going now, then that meant total war? I really wanted to combine the Annihilation Flamebone Core and the Titan before then. We haven't practiced enough. Sup. I guess it can't be helped. Would you like me to bring the others from the surface? They're all waiting for your order, hero. I'm ready to cry whenever you need me. Crying for you is, I guess I'll tell you at the end. They all seemed much livelier than before, especially Sarah, whose change was surprising. It was as though Sigald's death had released her from a hard demon, as she acted her age now. But unfortunately, sorry to rain on your parade, but it's not yet time. I only called Sarah, remember? Go back to work, especially you, Kracia. I'm leaving the Titan to you. Huh? Think about it. Why is the capital only now trying to find where the heroes are? There's no way they'd focus on the heroes. Think about it. They've basically taken no damage from the heroes. They took the most damage from either Anti-Skull or the Heaven-Defying General. Of course, the Heaven-Defying General is actually a hero, but they don't know that. Then why? They're trying to clean up. In other words, they're trying to reduce the number of variables. Thus, the Archmage, not the Emperor, has come forward. That's right, Shin Woo had already figured out that the Archmage had messed with the chatting channel. How did he do it? It was simple. He had used darkness mana within the chatting channel, so Shin Woo was not only able to hide his location but could also trace the Archmage's mana back to its source, and found Celine Vies's location as well as locate Lloyd and Arian on the side. So I checked with the mana radar and ta-da! The Archmage was there. I see. Our enemies are trying to kill the heroes to reduce the number of unknowns. So, as a result, you not only figured out that the Archmage is outside of the capital, but what his motives and location are as well. Exactly. Since he knew the Archmage's plan and location, he was now in the driver's seat. All he needed to do was wait for the right opportunity. You're not going to save Lloyd. You're using him to lure the Archmage out of the palace so that you can kill him. Am I right? Yep. You're the same as ever. You don't need to be so thorough. You don't have to be so cautious. Shin Woo just shrugged his shoulders. To be honest, he had already sent his Aram brigade to the coordinates and planned to use Fire Shadow to get there when it was time. But he didn't really need to tell them that. Then, I'll get going. Didn't you say you would wait for the right time? That's not it. Shin Woo used one of the permits to God's secret shop and smiled bitterly. I was just wondering if the secret shop was affected like the chatting channel. I'll be quick. The secret shop. This'll probably be my last trip to the secret shop, he thought, and was about to activate the permit, but then, someone grabbed onto his hand. It was none other than Sarah. She sported a complicated expression, but she was definitely holding onto his hand. She briefly hesitated but soon mustered up her courage. May I come with you? He could tell, looking at them from side to side. They were definitely sisters. The two of them looked incredibly alike and were beautiful enough to be considered the most beautiful in the Empire. So the mood between them was quite unfortunate. Guten Morgen. The mood wasn't all that great within the secret shop. In the midst of the two sisters' staring contest, Shin Woo spoke carefully. Since Plain wasn't giving him her classic greeting, he had to do it. Hello, Mr. Shin Woo. Plain twisted her head around and bowed towards Shin Woo. Sarah's eyebrows twitched at Mr. Shin Woo, but Shin Woo ignored her and replied. If you have some things to say to each other, then I can leave. No, I'm fine. I don't really have anything to say to her. Moreover, we can't really be called sisters anymore. Agreed. Now, Mr. Shin Woo, what did you come here for today? Shin Woo looked at the two testy women and thought, They sure like playing around. Who was it that begged him to save her sister again? And who was it that asked him to bring her to the secret shop again? They definitely had a lot to say to each other, yet they were holding back for some reason. Shin Woo had no way of figuring out why, but if they persisted, then he'd just go about with his business. I had some questions and wanted to tell you some things too. First, I killed Sigald. Sorry, I don't have any keepsakes to give you since they were all burned. I see. I already knew since I heard from her, but thank you for telling me in person. In the end, you had to deal with all of our family's problems. I'm sorry, what's with you all of a sudden? Isn't that your specialty? Ah, crap. Sarah finally began talking. She just pressed something more fearsome than the button for a nuclear bomb. Shin Woo briefly paused but soon decided to calm them down. Unfortunately, Sarah was faster. That's the way you deal with things. You run away, as if you're avoiding reality, and leave all the work to other people. Ho, that's rich coming from a half-wit like you. You didn't realize how weak you were, yet you tried to get revenge anyway. And then you lost all your comrades. In the end, you didn't do anything right. I don't want to hear that from you. You're not willing to get your hands dirty, yet you're willing to stand on the sidelines, selling weapons in exchange for such precious karma. I'm not sure if she's never gotten her hands dirty before, but at this rate, she probably will, Shin Woo thought and urgently tried to interfere, but... Hey, shouldn't we stop this? You'll just say things that'll hurt each other. Sarah, do you have any idea how I felt becoming God's apostle? I did it so you wouldn't have to do it. If our roles were reversed, then I would have killed older brother in one hit. One hit, I would have killed the emperor and the likes of Seldon, and brought peace to the empire a long time ago. Talk is cheap. There were rumors that you talked your way into your saintess position. They were probably right. Eek. Ah, crap, it's all over. The two had forgotten all about Shin Woo and were duking it out. The counter between them was shaking immensely. I was managing the communication between the heroes and God, as well as helping the heroes grow, while you went wild, unaware of the undead curse's effects on you. To you, who became an undead, my job must not seem very important. I'm asking just in case, but this isn't a specialty store that sells tea leaves. Do you understand? I'm so glad that you, who doesn't even know what a real battle is, didn't become an undead. Shall I tell you what our older brother's last moments were like? Did you even land a hit on him? I believe you didn't even cry once during the battle, even after Mr. Shin Woo turned you into a level 8 Elder Banshee. I did, mentally. I just thought my intervention wasn't necessary. You wouldn't know how important reserve forces are since all you're good at is yapping and picking tea leaves. Shin Woo even thanked me for making things go so smoothly. Mentally? Peeved. You want to spit out blood instead? Why is it that when these two sisters met, they showed a side that he'd never seen before? And why hadn't he noticed that black personality of theirs before? Shin Woo watched their intensifying sibling spat, took out some popcorn he'd prepared in advance for moments like this, and sat down in a corner. He'd made it since Prince wanted to eat it so badly, yet he was the first one to take a bite. Ah, this was the first time he'd made it, but it was delicious. Shin Woo wanted to drink some cola with it. Then, they started to drag him into it as well. And what's with Mr. Shin Woo? Mr. Shin Woo, what? Are you trying to seduce a hero now too? You're so old, so how can you be so indecent? You're trying to be so charming to a man who was once a level 1 skeleton? Or what, is it that you're so old now that you'll become a skeleton yourself soon? Look who's talking. It doesn't really matter, does it? You've become undead now, so you transcend things like age. Moreover, what's wrong with how I call him? You, who even at that age didn't know how to talk to a man without hitting them with your hammer, must think that a man and woman speaking amicably means that they're in a relationship. Sorry to say, but it's not true. That's because once I became older, all that was left were undead and monsters. Or what, did you want me to date someone like Ethan Cruz? And in the first place, you're the one who told me I didn't have a chance with the other male heroes whenever I came here. It's because you're clueless when it comes to relationships. You would have been ruined if you dated trash like Ethan Cruz. If you'd even bothered to learn love through books, then you would have known that my and Mr. Shin Woo's relationship isn't like that. Huh? Wait, do you? Why did Ethan Cruz have to be cursed out for something he didn't even do? While Shin Woo shook his head, Plain alternated between him and Sarah, as if she'd figured something out. Sarah noticed this and spoke in disgust. There's nothing between us. It looks like you're the one with your head in the clouds. It must be because you've only learned about romance from books. I know that, as a saintess, men would just respect you, they didn't ever approach you. They did, they just weren't good enough for me. Moreover, all the heroes tried flirting with me too. Didn't know that, did you? All of them. Everyone aside from Mr. Skeleton over there. I'm not a skeleton anymore, you know. If you want to fight, then keep it to yourselves. He'd rather they not drag him into this, but it seemed impossible. Shin Woo sighed and began boiling some water. He'd gotten quite thirsty from eating popcorn, so he decided to brew some tea that he'd bought on the surface. Are you brewing tea here? He thought it'd help the extremely agitated Sarah relax. It worked, as expected. He didn't think it would work, but to think it would be this easy. He smiled slightly and poured the boiling water into the teapot. You must be thirsty, so please drink a cup before you go on fighting or whatnot. Fighting? We're not fighting. Besides, I like alcohol more than tea. Something that can wash away all this frustration of mine. He knew she'd want alcohol instead of tea. Shin Woo took out something he'd been hiding for this moment. It was a new Century label wine bottle. Mr. Shin Woo, is that perhaps? It's our factory's newest brandy. It's harder to make, so we've only just started making it. Brandy, Century label. Brandy was a generic term for any distilled fruit wine, but this brandy distilled Century's red wine and fermented them in oak barrels. The price of brandy depended on the grapes and the manufacturing process used and was a luxurious drink. On Earth, Cognac, an area in France, was renowned for their brandy. So, it was only natural that Plain's eyes would sparkle once he said, brandy. Whereas Sarah looked speechless. You were making that too? What exactly are you doing underground, Shin Woo? Preparing for the future. We'll be unemployed once we're done with our mission as heroes. I have to prepare for my later years, don't I? Preparing for your later years, huh? I anguished over whether I could defeat the Emperor or not, but you were trying to find a job. At first, she didn't expect much, but her eyes widened, as Shin Woo's answer exceeded any expectations she might have had. Whereas Plain just gazed at him, wondering when she'd be able to taste the brandy. Plain knew him well enough to not be surprised about him preparing for his later years. On our world, we mixed brandy and tea together. Is it the same here? I'm not good with alcohol. I just like drinking alcohol by itself, so. Then why don't you try it? Shin Woo cruelly and boldly added the brandy to the tea, as if he had no intention of listening to them in the first place. Of course, Shin Woo added only a small amount of brandy to Sarah's cup, so that she could smell it but not taste it. On the other hand, he dumped so much brandy into Plain's cup that it was more akin to brandy with the smell of tea. You're not being considerate of the drinkers. How aggressive, but isn't it strange that men like that are popular? I suppose that's how it is in my older sister and Dana's romance novels. But in real life, it's the worst. Shin Woo ignored her grumbling and drank his own tea. He could smell a soft scent of brandy mixed into his tea, which really fit his taste. While they were good enough on their own, they tasted better by mixing them together. Brandy tea was a good example of this. Shin Woo was satisfied. Plain, who sipped on her own tea, smiled and said, "It's quite good. Is it because of the quality of the brandy? I still like tea as is. But it's not bad. If I had to pick a side, I'd say I like it, but compared to regular tea it's." She could have just said she liked it. Plain just looked at Sarah and sighed. As her older sister, she couldn't stop worrying about her. He's too good for you. HMPH. I don't want him. Hey, I'm right here. Don't go giving me to other people all of a sudden. Shin Woo stopped their delusions and cleared his throat. Anyway, can I ask you something now? It's regarding the chatting channel. The chatting channel? You should talk to me about that. He'd asked Plain, but he heard someone else respond from elsewhere. Shin Woo tilted his head and then, the environment changed. He saw a beautiful flower garden in full bloom as if it had come straight out of a fairy tale, along with a white table. He'd seen these things a few times before. It was God's garden. Come over here and sit. Brew me some tea too. With a lot of brandy. You could just make it yourself. Shin Woo was astounded, yet he pulled out a chair and sat down anyway. Across from him sat that damn god, appearing before him as both an old woman and a high school girl at the same time. God carefully took a sip of the tea with her thin, pale pink lips and sighed in satisfaction, as if enjoying the tea's scent. She then said, "I'll get straight to the point. This is all your fault." "That sounds like a load of bullshit, but let's hear what you have to say." Shin Woo gently opened his eyes and glared at her. She pushed her red hair to one side and shrugged her shoulders. "It's true. At first, I could only influence the world, or as you understand it, the surface and the underground together, so much. And I've been dividing that limited influence to summon the heroes, give them power, and develop them. Do you understand me thus far? So why is your influence on the world limited in the first place? Gods are absolute beings, aren't they?" He'd asked something similar before, and he was ignored back then. But he believed that now God would acknowledge him. God seemingly thought to herself regarding that, and then nodded her head and spoke. "Yeah, I guess it's time for you to know. If someone possessing a high-level presence or magic moves, then that's enough to shake the world. One person's karma changing affects other people's karma as well. Of course, that's how this world works after all. This was especially true for this world, such that he could see it with his own two eyes. Moreover, Shin Woo had experienced it with his own body, hadn't he? By switching between his form with limited immortality and his human form, he'd learned that when obtaining a terribly great karma, there was an equally heavy cost associated with it. At the time, he'd thought that God was just toying with him, but that wasn't the case. While it was a great risk, her bestowing immortality upon him was meant to reduce the side effects of bearing this kind of karma to its minimum. Of course, her not telling him in advance was just to mess with him. However, he understood her true intentions and nodded his head. God looked a bit moved. "You're beginning to transcend humanity too. You see, most humans would be confused around now. But that's the essence of karma, isn't it? Understanding it shows the difference between a transcendent and a mortal. By forming connections with others, your karma became distorted and developed in a completely different direction, so that may be why you were able to pick up on the essence of karma so quickly." God then lowered her empty cup. She tapped on the cup and it refilled with tea. She had restored Shin Woo's special mixture of tea and brandy. She gulped it down in one go and sighed. She then asked Shin Woo, "Do you understand what I just did? Time? Right, it's time. To be exact, it's creation using time magic. Recreating something that is gone. It's quite simple for me, but if used in the world, then it would be too much for it to bear and a city may vanish right then and there. That's what karma is, and that's the main reason why I haven't been able to intervene so much." Shin Woo tilted his head. While Shin Woo had understood the result, he couldn't understand the process. But the result did tell him something. For example, if Shin Woo were to use the very same time magic for creation, then he was confident that he wouldn't cause the same adverse effects. "Why, you ask, can't you just trick it? It seems pretty simple to me." The world. You've already been doing that. I've seen you twist order around, such that it's unclear who the true owner of your karma is. I was really shocked, but that's impossible for me to do, since I can't use that innate element. If God were both omnipotent and omniscient, then she'd be able to do everything Shin Woo could do. However, she thought innate elements were special and claimed that even she could not fool the world. But if that's the case, then why? Are innate elements powers of the gods? Yeah, he naturally came to that conclusion. Had he become a god at some point? But he soon rejected that notion, as he felt he was still lacking in several areas to be called a god. Moreover, there are way too many people in the world who wield innate elements. Aside from me, there's the dark flame ghosts, the Garuda, Sagald, the magic emperor, the undead emperor, Jizahenu, should be able to too. And based on the energy tampering with the chatting channel, the archmage must be able to too. They don't become gods per se, but you could say that they've met the conditions to transcend karma itself. That's actually why I'm concerned. Like you said, there have been way too many individuals with innate elements. You're an exceptional irregular, but the events hundreds of years ago had too much of an effect. I should have stopped it myself, but why didn't I? There was definitely a way to minimize the chaos and stop it. But by allowing the humans to take matters into their own hands, I ended up having to intervene more than before. I was so foolish. Let's get back on topic now, shall we? As one ages, they gain a specialty. It was talking about one thing, and then suddenly going on a tangent. Before it was too late, Shin Woo slapped his cheek and spoke. Then, God went, "Oh my," and nodded her head. Anyway, that's why my influence is limited. If you were in my place, then you wouldn't even have to worry about this and could just kill Jizehanu or Gerald yourself. Dark Shadow. That thing's really overpowered. Remember, you may think that Annihilation Flame or whatnot is overpowered, but it's not. It's Dark Shadow. Got it? God was being jealous. While sweating buckets, Shin Woo tried to steer the conversation back on track. So the surface's emperor is called Gerald, huh? It really suits him. I don't know what his public name is, but his name is definitely Gerald. But what were we talking about again? Ah, that's right. First, give me another cup of tea. You could just restore it like last time. But it feels different. That's karma for you. Perhaps there was something he still didn't know about karma. He poured her another cup of tea while pouting. She took it satisfyingly and returned to their original conversation. I should tell you how I bestow power upon the heroes. First, the summon. I summon those fated to die in another world and send out someone dying from this world. This is the basics of summoning. It's done to reduce the summoning's adverse effects on the world as much as possible. And the power I bestow. I told you this at the beginning, so I don't need to go over it again, do I? This is my influence. It was all going according to plan up to here, but the problem started afterwards. The secret shop? The secret shop maintains balance by accepting Perium for its goods. Of course, there were some issues with it as well, but there are some issues that can be dealt with because most of you heroes are otherworlders and not from this world. It seems like bestowing power upon otherworlders, rather than the original inhabitants of this world, has a much less adverse effect on the world. Well, what do you think? It's quite a delicate balance, isn't it? You get how much I love this world, right? Then what's the problem? Was Ms. Goddess over here always such a chatterbox? If not, then was it because of Shin Woo's actions thus far? Either way, he wouldn't be happy, so he just urged her to continue. God continued her explanation whilst grumbling. The quest rewards. Ah, I see. Especially the 12 general quests, right? Yep, exactly. God scratched her head as if she felt like this was a pain in the ass. The reason the 12 general quests were set up that way was because I thought beating them was just that difficult and that they wouldn't be defeated so frequently. At the time, I didn't think a hero would show up that would kill 7 of the 12 generals by himself. Ah, as I thought. I kind of get it. It all happened because I was too good, right? Yeah, you bugged player. If Shin Woo were to liken the situation to a game, then it would be something like, when all the goods are pushed onto one side, then the game's balance breaks. With the emergence of an irregular like Shin Woo, God's delicately balanced influence broke. It's quite ironic, but the situation's less severe than it could have been, all because of your Joker karma. If you didn't have it, then the hero system would have failed a long time ago. You don't seem to be aware of it, but you've already halfway transcended the world. Meaning you're not recognized as one of the inhabitants of this world. Of course, that probably doesn't matter to you, since I just need to trick it. Shin Woo replied plainly. To be honest, he already knew that. As his Joker karma grew stronger, he felt more and more isolated from this world's rules. Even God acknowledged that as well. But who cared? If he stayed on this world, then it would become his home. Shin Woo was already prepared to kick back and live peacefully on this world. Anyway, most of my power went to you, which made the problem even worse. Not only am I less and less able to interfere with what happens in this world, but the power I've already used is also starting to weaken as well. And he just happened to take advantage of this opportunity. The Archmage. That's right, it would have been impossible with normal mana, but that bastard has learned an innate element. At first, Shin Woo wasn't 100% sure it was the Archmage that had invaded the chatting channel. Since the mana pattern he'd remembered differed from the one within the chatting channel. So then why wasn't Shin Woo able to confirm that it was the Archmage, even though he was familiar with his mana? It was simple. As Shin Woo had suspected, the Archmage was using some sort of mana he wasn't familiar with. In other words, he was using an innate element. He didn't even want to think about it, but there was a high chance that he'd awakened an innate element from his battle with Shin Woo and Segald. You're just an undead, yet you're growing, thought Shin Woo, though he wasn't one to talk. In any case, you can't use the chatting channel anymore. That's not all. The other heroes probably won't be able to go to the secret shop anymore. He seems aware of how dangerous it would be to invade the secret shop though, as he hasn't dared to enter, so I don't have to worry about playing. Wow, do you get it? I can't summon new heroes or provide you with supplies anymore. Everything's on you now, you have to do it. If you fail, then it really is the end. If that happens, then I'll have to intervene and start everything anew. Of course, he'd roughly expected this, but he felt somewhat odd hearing it from her. Shin Woo contemplated on what she'd said and then asked, "Does that mean the world will end? If you're playing a game with your character, Hero A, but you find you can't beat it, then what do? You erase that character and try again with Hero DDDD. Be more creative with your names. So I ask of you, Hero A. It's really tiring to make a new game from scratch, and it's really sad too." She genuinely bowed before him. He couldn't even imagine her doing this, considering how their first meeting went. Hero A. Shin Woo shrugged his shoulders and stood up. If he failed, he would die too. There was no need to answer her. One more question. What is it? Oh, Plane's a virgin. Isn't that hilarious? Thanks, I really wanted to know that. No, not that. Sarah's a virgin too. I knew that already. So what exactly is Invisible Heart? God's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't seem surprised. Perhaps she was waiting for him to ask her that. She soon narrowed her eyes and smiled. Even if I were to tell you, you wouldn't understand. But if it's you, you may be able to figure it out by yourself soon enough. You're really no help at all, you old bag. Then, take care, Shin Woo. It's been such a long time since I've played around with someone who could understand my level. Come back and play with me again. The next moment, Shin Woo had returned to the secret shop. Plane and Sarah were watching him with eyes wide open, as he disappeared and suddenly reappeared. He remembered what God had said and in embarrassment, turned his head around. "What's the matter, Mr. Shin Woo?" "Never mind, it's nothing, nothing at all." Shin Woo couldn't handle the awkwardness any longer, so he was thankful that the Arams had suddenly sent him the report that he'd been waiting for. The human and elvish heroes, Lloyd and Arian, were heading towards the location of Celine Vies's distress signal, a level 4 danger zone in a city nearby Byron, as fast as they could. Whilst doing so, Lloyd's face remained tense and displeased. "I can't believe it. I thought he valued his comrades more than anyone else." But you can't really blame him, Lloyd. Arian, who was running beside him, just smiled bitterly. She, like Lloyd, had attempted to persuade Shin Woo within the chatting channel, but she was doubtful that their rescue attempt would even work. Shin Woo has the right to prioritize his life over another's. Moreover, do you remember, Lloyd? When he was still a rookie, Shino asked for our aid, yet we abandoned him. We also did the same with Jin as well. Jin Jaein, she muttered and felt a dull pain in her heart. Though she doubted his plan, she still ran beside him nonetheless. Perhaps it was her atonement for not mustering up the courage to save Jin before. He learned how to be a hero from us, so it's the correct choice to make as a hero. Still, back then, there was nothing we could do. I know, I couldn't do anything either. And Shin Woo is likely in the same position right now. He told us, didn't he? That he can't move right now. I don't think he's lying. I know because I'm an elf. Are you saying he's right? It's not a matter of right or wrong. You already know, right? Lloyd's unfriendly expression remained. Arian sighed softly so that he wouldn't hear her. Following their extermination of 2 of the 12 generals, Lloyd had been affected by Shin Woo in a variety of ways, 2 of which being his desire to improve and an unerasable shame. Lloyd was always hot-blooded and somewhat exhausting to deal with, but he became even worse following that event. In any case, after the events of that day, Lloyd has continued to train without taking care of himself. Because of that, I was somehow able to reach level 7 too. Lloyd must think that he's stronger than Shin Woo at this point. In her honest opinion, he had absolutely no chance. Even if 2 Lloyds were to attack him simultaneously, Shin Woo would still win with ease, she thought, but she was afraid that saying that would hurt Lloyd, so she couldn't be honest with him. But then, Celine Vs' distress signal came at such an auspicious time. That probably made Lloyd remember how Shin Woo had saved Jin Jin. It's unfortunate, but Redidane died too. Lloyd must be thinking that Shin Woo failed to save his comrade this time, so if he were to succeed with Celine, then he'd be a greater hero than Shin Woo. She couldn't help but sigh. This pointless competition, which wouldn't allow him to be outdone by Shin Woo, had caused him to make such a foolish decision. Arian thought she may actually die this time. She hadn't taken Shin Woo's warning lightly. But what could she do? She loved the idiot. So, she decided to go with him, regardless of the danger, or so she thought, but then she felt her temper flare. Following him to their deaths without voicing her opposition would be nothing more than a dog's death. And so, she stopped running. Lloyd, I don't think Shin Woo was wrong either. But please understand, Arian. With how powerful we've become, I don't think we can turn a blind eye to our comrades who are in danger. Lloyd, he kept piling on the excuses, yet Arian's calm voice stifled him. Her unyielding voice had caused him to shut up. I'm not going to talk about that anymore, Lloyd. I was against it because I thought it was too dangerous, but I came along since you were willing to stake your life on it. Since it would be better for us to die together than to let you die alone. Arian, do you still not get it, Lloyd? She really didn't know what to do with him. Arian smiled bitterly and said, I love you enough to risk my life for you. Huh, Arian, you love me? Wait a sec, you mean like, as a friend? You really think I can't differentiate between the two? I'm not you. The love that all our parents shared, I'm talking about that love. You understand, right? Hey, I know I'm dull and all, but that kind of hurts. Lloyd's face reddened instantly. He hesitated and was unable to reply, truly a trait befitting a hero. But Arian sighed in relief, as she had avoided the worst situation. After all, Lloyd hadn't said something like, I don't think this is the time for jokes, and rejected her. I'm afraid of dying without telling you my feelings, so I'm telling them to you now. You don't need to answer me right away, so let's get going. Let's go. We have to go save Celine. I got it. Yeah, we have to rescue him. No matter what. And so, Lloyd began running once more, albeit awkwardly. Arian stuck closer to him and just smiled. It was so easy, so why hadn't she done it all this time? She almost felt as stupid as Lloyd. Then again, that's why we get along so well, she thought and smiled softly once more. Unfortunately, her smile didn't last long. They went through the city and entered the facility where Celine was trapped, but suddenly, their body and minds tensed up. TCH, so only you two showed up, huh? Why you're the Lich. Gu, Gahawk. They had anticipated some traps, but they didn't know what types of traps there would be, as well as who would be waiting for them. And the person waiting for them far exceeded their expectations. LV8 Archmage Fiotane von Selden. To think, the level 8 Lich was awaiting them. Kihi, what the hell is this? Senior, why are you here? They hadn't expected him to be waiting for them, with dozens of high-rank undead at that. No, undead heroes. Senior, even our great seniors who we've only heard stories about. Why are you all here? There was no way they could have expected this. The Lich had known about the heroes long ago and collected the heroes that had died within the Empire. Now that I think about it, one of you was quite sharp. But he must not have known that I was tracking you as well. With my new power that connects space through darkness, dark space. Dark space? What are you talking about? As I thought, you don't know. It just means that lucky fellow will soon become like you. The Lich was delighted, as he'd finally obtained an innate element, something he'd never achieved in the past. However, Lloyd and Arian couldn't understand him, as they didn't even know what an innate element was. The Lich just clicked his tongue at their reaction and extended both hands. Now, come over here. Don't worry, I'll try and keep you intact, since you'll soon be a part of our Imperial army. Kahik, undead, Kook, Celine Viesa, who'd baited them here, had become an undead as well. The undead curse had affected him in the worst way possible. Although he had become an undead, he still hated the undead, so he was trying to strangle himself. However, an undead wouldn't go down from just strangling them. So he, who had lost his life to the Archmage and was imprisoned here, just rolled on the floor, continuously trying to end his life despite being unable to. It wasn't enough to call the sight horrid. It was much, much worse. Why? Why did you kill Celine? What did he do wrong? That's just junk. To think he couldn't even accept his new life and tried to end it. How could he be so foolish? He was quite skilled, so I recruited him into the Imperial Army, but if he keeps making such a fuss, then I have no choice but to leave him behind. Now then, I have high hopes for the two of you. The Lich, unable to conceal his excitement, continued. To think your first reaction upon seeing this many undead was, Senior. I'm astounded. You consider them heroes, not undead, I see. It's proof that you've overcome the curse like us. I don't doubt that you'll be able to accept reality, even after becoming undead like us. Hearing that, Lloyd understood. Even if they were previously his seniors, the first emotion that should have come to mind was hatred. This was the effect of the undead curse, something that even the heroes couldn't avoid. Then why? Perhaps it's because I met Shino that one time. What did he think back then? When he saw Shino Rendu rush into the fray to save his comrades, despite becoming an undead, was the first thing he thought of killing him? No, it wasn't. He'd said that he was happy to see him, that it was unfortunate that this had happened to him, and that despite everything, he was thankful. That's what he'd thought back then. Yeah, now that he thought about it, that's when everything changed. But did he reject those feelings? Nope, not at all. On the contrary, those feelings were natural. It was only natural for a human to feel that way. It didn't matter whether they were an undead or not. It doesn't matter to me if they're undead or not. The hero, Lloyd HK, gritted his teeth and gripped his sword. The approaching senior, the level 6 undead hero that he'd met just once several years ago, was cut down, and he then declared. They were all heroes with such noble souls. I'm not cutting them down because they're undead. I'm putting them to peace so that their wills aren't defiled any longer. And you, Lich, I'm not going to what? The Lich, seemingly interested, brandished his staff and intensified the darkness surrounding the undead heroes. Though he faced a power akin to a necromancer's, Lloyd didn't back down. Seeing that, Arian followed suit, gritting her teeth and raising her bow. Going to forgive you. I swear I'll kill you. In place of all the heroes you've killed. Ha 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 ha. Truly a response befitting one of God's heroes. I think I've heard that same line about 10 times now. The Lich laughed in excitement and Lloyd merely gritted his teeth. Though he'd said all that, he was getting pushed back bit by the wave of undead heroes. It was unavoidable. The more confident you sounded, the weaker you appeared. Seniors, I'm sorry. I promise I'll avenge you. Can't you say something original? Every word you say is so cliché that I can't take it. Are all heroes as frustrating as you? Is that it? Entry number 2, Shin Woo. I'll try coming up with something original. Then, the Lich, who was floating in the air, heard a voice coming from behind him. Hi, the name's Shin Woo. I'm right behind you. None of the undead had sensed him. Even Arian, with her astute senses, couldn't sense him, nor could Lloyd. And even the Archmage, what? I don't have a heart, so let's try breaking yours. This man, who'd managed to fool the supermode Lich, was obviously Shin Woo, who'd come after finishing his preparations. How about it? Original enough for you? In one hand, he gripped a crystal shrouded in deep darkness, and in the other, he gripped the death god's shining bone sword and winked. And the Archmage screamed, "Aye, my heart, how do you have that?" He's the one who wanted them to come up with something, so he couldn't help but be disappointed by the Archmage's reaction. Shin Woo snorted and raised the dark red crystal. It was quite the appetizing crystal, which contained the Archmage, Theotane von Seldon's soul. Once Shin Woo had realized that the Lich had invaded the chatting channel, he had first split the Arams into 2 squads, and mobilized them. We've found him, Master. As I expected. Hooray for the Mana radar. First was the area where Celine and the Archmage were located. It was a small city situated near the level 4 danger zone, Byron. He sent the Arams, satisfying the condition for Fire Shadow, and then waited for the right moment. He could, of course, defeat the Archmage without all this preparation. An innate element? Shin Woo knew, as someone who often used innate elements, that someone who just awakened an innate element couldn't contend with someone who possessed 5. If the Archmage had simultaneously reached level 9 as well, then it would be a different story. However, he wasn't there yet. Not at all. But security is strict. Okay, I'll go personally. Then why had he sent the Arams ahead of him? This could be explained by the second preceding battle. Shin Woo and Sigald were ahead in terms of pure power, and the Archmage's space element had been sealed, leading to his head being split apart. However, he was a lich, a being that could revive itself several times. As long as his life vessel remains intact, he could regain his physical body and revive himself any number of times. This was really a case of the pot calling the kettle black, as he possessed a revival ability of his own, invisible heart, but it was so cowardly. If Shin Woo just went and killed him, then it'd be such a waste of a good opportunity. The lich was outside of the capital, but if he killed him, then he'd just revive himself. Please be careful, Master. They are powerful. They won't be able to notice me. Don't worry. Shin Woo had split the Arams into two, sending the other squad to a different location. Where, you ask? Security's tight. It's perfect. The Lord Archmage commanded us to be wary of Sigald von Rededane's mana response. With this artifact, the anti-skull mana detector, which was personally created by the Archmage himself, we should be able to find him, even if he completely erases his presence and reappears. He had sent them to a secret facility within the capital which housed the container for the Archmage's soul or life vessel. I thought he was an idiot, like any undead, for leaving the capital, but it looks like he's not. But to think they've created an artifact specifically for Sigald. It seems like they really were worried about him. Though I'm not sure if that thing can actually detect the annihilation flame or not. The mana radar's top priority was to locate the Archmage and the Emperor's life vessel. And once he'd created the mana radar, he checked the locations of their life vessels, but it's not like he could be like, let's go destroy their souls now. The Archmage's life vessel was stored in an extremely vital building within the capital, and Selden would stay around it when he had nothing better to do. On the other hand, the Emperor's life vessel was located in the deepest part of the palace. In other words, it was near impossible for anyone to steal their life vessels undetected. If I didn't have annihilation flame, that is. At first, he thought he had no other option but to fight head-on and destroy the Archmage's life vessel before he had a chance to recover. In terms of destroying the life vessel, charging headfirst or fighting them head-on wasn't much different. But with Sigald's annihilation flame, he had another option. It was unlikely to work with the Emperor's life vessel, but he was confident that he could steal the Archmage's life vessel in his absence. Why didn't the Archmage hide his life vessel in the palace too? He thought of several reasons. 1. The Archmage wasn't entirely loyal to the Emperor, or 2. It could be dangerous to store two life vessels in the same location. If it was neither of the two, then perhaps two life vessels couldn't be placed near each other. From what I'm seeing, that seems like the most likely option here. This black crystal, which was protected by countless undead, shook its surroundings and emitted an uncanny energy. Seeing that, Shin Woo nodded his head. He'd always been curious as to how a life vessel was made, but he could make a guess after looking at it. It mostly consisted of the space and darkness elements, as well as layers upon layers of unknown magic. The life vessel required careful storage and another life vessel couldn't be placed in its direct vicinity. And it looks like that crystal took a piece of the source of darkness too. That's what comes from just taking a little bit of it. If that's the case, then what exactly is the darkness that lay beneath the palace? Hey, wait a sec. Shin Woo thought, but then tilted his head. The source of darkness was beneath the palace. And the Emperor's life vessel was beneath the palace as well. If that's the case, then, did that damn Emperor use the source of darkness itself as his life vessel? When he actually saw the Archmage's life vessel, what had once seemed a delusion had turned out to be a reality. Hey, that means that killing the Emperor and purifying the Empire are one and the same. It didn't matter anyway. In the end, he needed to do both. Shin Woo thought about the steep obstacle he'd have to face within the palace and sighed deeply. He soon refocused on his current situation. If he wasted any more time here, then Lloyd and Arian would die. Honestly, he really didn't care what happened to them, but he didn't really want to see Prince cry. First, let's make a backup. The Archmage's life vessel was stored very carefully. Just because he'd found the life vessel didn't mean that it was smooth sailing from now on. Not only were several level 7 elite undead standing guard, though many of them had been annihilated by Shin Woo's light blast. But there were also dozens of space-type traps that activated upon the entrance of an intruder. And by touching the life vessel, several more traps would activate. Lastly, once the life vessel disappeared, another trap would be activated. And even with all that, the Archmage usually remained close to his life vessel, so he really was careful. The intermediate annihilation flame element has become LV2 and magic has increased by 20. I'm good, except for that last trap. But Shin Woo's power, or more specifically, annihilation flame, allowed him to ignore most of the traps. By erasing his presence, the traps didn't have anyone to target. There was an error in the activation process, so the traps didn't even activate. It was simple. Good, I switched it out. As for the final trap, which activated upon the life vessel's disappearance, Shin Woo switched the real-life vessel with a fake created with his disguise skill, preventing the trap from triggering. In the short period of time in which he switched the two, Shin Woo had also used his shining flame on the magic circle, which made up the trap, and erased cause and effect. And by adding in his acting skill, he was able to do it with ease. Though he was forced to use a significant amount of mana for this brief distortion, Shin Woo's level wasn't just for show. He was able to replace the real-life vessel with a fake one before his mana bottomed out. The fake won't last for very long. But it didn't need to last that long. He had the Archmage's life vessel in his grasp and planned to go straight to the Archmage with it in tow. Artifact, all clear. Treasure, all clear. I want to fight. I want to eat meat. He took a peek at the undead, who stood guard without even knowing what he'd done, grinned, and left the facility. Annihilation flames totally overpowered. It seems better than Dark Shadow. He sent a message to the other Aram and then activated Fire Shadow, allowing him to instantaneously travel to a far-off location, where the Archmage was oppressing the heroes. With a single glance, he saw his seniors, the undead heroes he hadn't killed yet, with his juniors, as well as the Archmage, who looked down at them in satisfaction from midair. Shin Woo felt he'd hit his limit with Annihilation Flame, so he chose to reveal himself then and there. His intro had enough impact to cause the Archmage to freeze completely. And time begins to move once more. How do you have my heart? That's not what's important. The fact is that I have your heart in my hands. Shin Woo smiled at the Archmage and squeezed the crystal. But surprisingly, the once frantic Archmage had regained his composure. But you didn't break it. You came all this way and brought it to me without breaking it. At that moment, Shin Woo was truly surprised. Shin Woo could tell that the Lich was trying to use his mana on the life vessel. It was the space element. He was using the fusion element of darkness and space, the dark space element, on the crystal. The power of space flowed through the darkness, an element that allowed him unlimited control over anything consisting of darkness. It was truly a formidable ability, especially when he considered that it was difficult to use the space element effectively against another level 9. While this could be replicated with a maxed-out darkness element, dark space set itself apart. The darkness encroached space, and the ability to control said space was maximized. Perhaps dark space was the element most compatible with the darkness element. Your biggest mistake was your arrogance. You should have known that I'd have awakened a new power upon seeing yours. Ooh, the life vessel was already in the Lich's hand. Shin Woo was astonished and applauded him. The next moment, a black flame ignited over the Archmage's palm. Now, the life vessel had returned to Shin Woo's hand. It was quite obvious, but he had used his maxed-out darkness element, Dark Shadow, and Dark Flame together. Of course, the Archmage didn't really understand what had happened. Regardless of how great his innate element was, there was no way that he could overcome Shin Woo, who possessed 5 of them. It was nice. I'll give you an 8. Darkness blazed upon his palm and devoured the life vessel. The reason he hadn't destroyed the life vessel and come straight here was because of the off chance that the Lich would explode, taking Lloyd and Arian with him, fully destroying and absorbing the LV8 Archmage Feotane von Selden's life vessel through bone reinforcement. You have completely absorbed the magic source, and magic has increased by 230. The soul is returning to its owner. Once all traces of the life vessel disappeared, Shin Woo felt a full amount of mana welling with him. It wasn't like Shin Woo's mana, which he'd acquired through bone reinforcement or through adapting to his circumstances, but purely the Archmage's own mana, one who'd followed the path of a magician his entire life. He couldn't even begin to describe the satisfaction and the joy he felt. Ah, I guess I can't take in an entire soul, even with my abilities. Ji Gugok. With the life vessel's destruction, the Archmage's soul was forcefully ejected and returned to him. However, the Archmage wasn't able to withstand the pain. He screamed and started rolling around in the air. He'd lost control of his mana and spread it out everywhere, but it was all stained by Shin Woo's darkness and eliminated. Destroying his life vessel, the return of his soul, as well as the Lich's anguish from its return were all great experiences in killing Liches. It would help when he killed the Emperor. You made one mistake, Lich. Gua. Shin Woo quickly stabbed the Lich with the Death God's shining bone sword and then said with a somber expression. You met me. While the Archmage's magic was high, his actual defensive capabilities were quite low, so the shining bone sword cut him to pieces. Fortunately, his bone showed up properly this time. You have hunted a member of the 12 generals, the LV8 Archmage, Theotain von Seldin. All contributing heroes receive 50 million perium, and all stats increased by 100. You have acquired 15 permits to God's secret shop. Proficiency in all combat-related skills has increased significantly. You have received God's grace. The invisible heart skill's maximum level has increased by 15. The beginner shining flame element has become LV8 and magic has increased by 10. The high rank assimilation skill has become LV9, and agility and magic have increased by 30. You have given a Lich, one who defies natural order and lives with an imperfect soul, eternal rest. You have acquired the title, Immortal Hunter. All stats have increased by 40. The Rebellion skill has become LV9 and all stats have increased by 20. Whenever the conditions for the Rebellion skill are met, all stats temporarily increase by 27%. Now, even if he killed one of the 12 generals, his combat skills wouldn't level very quickly. That's because most of his skills were high level already. With his high rank assimilation skill reaching level 9, most of his skills were level 9 now. It felt like it'd evolve once it reached level 10, but getting there was the problem. At the very least, he realized that he couldn't reach level 10 with God's rewards anymore. He was disappointed, but he was also happy about his stat growth. Killing one of the 12 generals increases all my stats by 100, and with the new title and the Rebellion skill, all my stats increase by an additional 60 apiece. So, my total stats are 24,553. The title's amazing, but Rebellion's quite surprising as well. To be honest, Shin Woo hadn't put much interest in the Rebellion skill, as it required him fulfilling 2 of its conditions before he overcame a level difference of 1. However, this skill would grow whenever he performed some great feat, and before he knew it, it was already level 9. Whenever he met one of the skill's conditions, his stats would increase by 27%. If he met 2 of them, then his stats would increase by 54% instead. Just using the Titan would meet one of Rebellion's conditions, and fighting a huge army would meet another, so just those 2 conditions would increase his stats by a whopping 54%. If he took into account his stats, which were at the cusp of level 9, as well as the Titan, he felt like he could really take a level 9 opponent head-on. Not a weakened opponent like the Garuda, but someone like the Magic or Undead Emperors. But the problem was that the Lich's loot was nothing to write home about. You have acquired 541,609,990 perium. You have acquired the LV8 Archmage Theotain von Seldin's parietal bone. TCH, I guess I've been too lucky lately. It's right before the final battle, yet he only drops 1 bone. If he dropped 2, then I might have hit level 9, but meh, I'll absorb the bone later. I have something more important to do. He had something more important to do? Obviously, it was reforming his undead seniors. Shin Woo, how did you? No, more importantly, how did you manage to kill the Archmage? I'll tell you later. We have to deal with our seniors. Ah, my juniors there too, huh? Shin Woo ignored both Lloyd and Arian, who stared at him dumbfoundedly, and turned his attention to his undead seniors. They, like Lloyd, stood vacantly, but unlike him, they stood still because their master had died. The Lich, looks like some of them are dead already. That's too bad, hope we meet in our next life. Anyway, everyone, do you guys remember? Who killed you and who you need to kill? Kuhawk. In the past, he tried desperately to persuade his undead seniors with dramatic flair, but that was unnecessary. Shin Woo spoke naturally as if he were speaking to a friend, yet his neither soft yet loud voice resounded throughout the area, such that the undead could all hear him. You all remember, right? It's too much of a waste to die here. Hating yourselves for becoming undead is proof of your ambition and your intelligence. Ambition, intelligence, my intellect, yeah, I'm a hero. That's right, you're a hero, handpicked by God herself. You're not going to stay here and rot whilst attacking your juniors, are you? Right, I am. No matter what rubbish came out of his mouth, the undead heard whatever they wanted to hear. Shin Woo didn't adjust his speech for them, on the contrary, they adjusted his speech themselves. This was neither the power of acting nor instigate, it was on the level of magic at this point. What are you doing, Shin Woo? What the undead are? Lloyd, who was unaware of his darkness element, or the acting and instigate skills, realized that there was an extraordinary amount of power within his words. But still, wasn't conversing with the undead a bit too much? His seniors had already become undead, beings which shouldn't exist, yet instead of giving them a pain-free death or a peaceful rest, Shin Woo was tormenting them even further. Open your eyes. Your enemy isn't here. Do you want to die unavenged, or do you want to continue struggling? That's up to you. Hey, Shin Woo. Lloyd, stop. Ever since Shin Woo had arrived, so many strange things had happened. Not only had the Archmage died, but the undead had stopped. But he still needed to stop him, or so he thought, but when he tried to step forward, Arian stopped him. Arian? Just sit still, Lloyd. Doesn't it look like they're paying attention to him? Yeah, it looks that way, but what's your point? It seems like he's trying to persuade them. Persuade the undead? No, our seniors who met an unfortunate demise. Didn't you say so before? That they're not undead, but our seniors. I think so too. In the past, he would never have been able to see them that way. The undead were the undead, end of story. And they were also beings that must be defeated. He wasn't entirely sure if Shino Rendu was the catalyst, but the undead heroes were capable of reverting to their original forms, and Lloyd had become able to acknowledge them because of it. If that's the case, then, he would have to acknowledge their newfound potential. They'll fight on the heroes' side again? Can he really do it? Yes, like Shino Rendu. Shino Rendu's not on our side. He fights for the heaven-defying general. He himself told us that the heaven-defying general's on our side. Perhaps he was once a hero? There's absolutely no way. They're not completely off the mark. Though I wasn't once a hero, but I'm still one now, Shin Woo whispered in a corner, and only inwardly replied to his seniors, who were undergoing an identity crisis. In the past, he wasn't able to persuade all of his seniors. But since then, his acting and instigate skills had grown by leaps and bounds, as well as him acquiring several innate elements related to cause and effect. Plus, he had the wild card skill now too, which combined the power of all those skills together and allowed him to manipulate a situation to his liking, so now he could. I'll bring you to your true enemy. Open your eyes. Fight them. We have to put an end to the undead curse. That's your final duty as one of the heroes. Celine, you don't need to suffer anymore. You don't need to hate every undead anymore. Don't let the curse consume you. Now's the time for you to control the curse. Senior Shin Woo, now's the time. You've all been waiting for so long. Now, we'll bring peace to the underground ourselves. Kuu. At that moment, the darkness that had been welling inside him spread throughout the clearing. The darkness, which felt incredibly warm, completely covered the undead heroes. Celine Viesa, who had continued strangling himself, had, at some point, sported a relaxed expression and was letting the darkness do as it willed. The final battle is near. Heroes, return as heroes once more. A considerable amount of darkness filled the clearing, which was then sucked into the undead heroes. Lloyd and Arian shook while watching, and one of the undead raised their heads with an incomparably clean appearance. You're right, though I retained my intellect, I had forgotten my purpose for so many years. I can completely remember being violated by that lich day by day. The undead hero's once rotting flesh had become indistinguishable from human skin and appeared to him as a middle-aged man. His tattered leather armor was dyed in black and shined brighter than new clothes. I have a goal. To be acknowledged as a hero, strike down evil, and return goodness to this land. Even I, who had been killed by the Empire's undead, have a goal. Soon, another stood opposite from him. She, who was once a ghoul, had regained her beautiful appearance. Her once tattered white robes were pressed by the crisp darkness, turning them into black robes which covered her entire body. Ah, I no longer hate myself or the living. I finally realized that I was trapped in a delusion, ever since I became an undead. I've been completely freed from the curse. I thank you, Junior, you, who possesses such an astounding power. You, who possesses the ability to set the darkness right. Another undead hero, who just a short while ago had rampaged about whilst carrying a scythe as tall as he was and whose appearance was indistinguishable, had been restored by Shin Woo's darkness. He had returned to being a lively, elvish young man. Kuuk, senior, I am, senior. Because he remembered everything that had occurred, tears flowed from his eyes. The young man no longer hated himself. Celine, how's it feel becoming an undead? It's not much different, is it? Senior, Shin Woo jokingly winked at him and raised a hand. His hand, which had clearly been human, had instantaneously turned to bone and clacked. Your appearance doesn't matter. You can always change it. What does matter is what's inside. Celine, what's inside you? Celine Viesa, who'd returned to life, looked down at his hands. As he was once a boxer, his hands were once covered with blisters and cuts. But now, he had been reformed and his hands were completely clean. They were only slightly, very slightly pale. But the power within them, he was much more powerful than before. I have hatred inside me. Celine tightened his fists and replied. Within those lively, human-looking eyes of his blazed a blue goblin fire, which proved what he was. Hatred towards those who made me like this. Hatred towards my once foolish self. Hatred towards reality itself. Hatred towards the undead empire. Good. Hatred is one of our most important emotions, one that proves that we're alive. It's fine to have, so long as you direct it in the proper place. Shin Woo confirmed that he'd reformed all 27 undead heroes, 6 level 7s, 14 level 6s, and 7 level 5s, and smiled in satisfaction. He then looked at the level 6 Avenger, who gazed upon him with blazing goblin fire, and declared. Let's go, Celine. I've prepared the perfect stage for you to unleash your anger. Now then, the vanguard's up front. Come up if you want to. You stay in the back, you go up front. Shin Woo, Shin Woo gathered the 27 new undead heroes and began forming a squad out of them. Seeing that, Arian realized one thing. The skeleton hand he'd shown earlier, perhaps that was. Are you actually the heaven-defying general? Arian, that's ridiculous. There's no way he's. Bingo. What? He figured that by coming to rescue them, his identity would be exposed. After all, it was far too late in the game to be worried about that. However, before coming here, he'd thought, their reactions will be a pawn, but looking at them now, that didn't seem all that true. Why, you're the heaven-defying general? Yes, Shin Woo quickly affirmed, and Lloyd gaped. Shin Woo grinned and briefly switched his face to that of an undead, and then switched back. Lloyd's mouth had widened so much that it seemed like his jaw and the roof of his mouth would separate. As I thought, if that's the case, then everything makes sense. If I hadn't seen your undead transformation just now, then I wouldn't have been sure. Did you always have the ability to transform into an undead? If not, then, it's the opposite. I'm an undead, but I can transform into a human. Well, my human form is perfect, so there's not much difference either way. How? No. Why? Why did you? While Arian seemed to get the gist of things, Lloyd was still confused. Lloyd's expression reminded him of Prince, causing him to grin. He then turned around and said, Now then, there's a lot I have to tell you. Please follow me. Without an ounce of hesitation, Shin Woo led the 27 undead heroes, as well as Lloyd, who couldn't accept reality and was tottering around, and Arian to his base. And thus, Shin Woo had unified the remaining heroes underground, undead or otherwise. Objectively speaking, their forces surpassed the Imperial armies. Perhaps the disparity between their forces was wider than he thought. So we were the only ones out of the loop. I feel stupid for suffering. I didn't keep it secret on purpose. Rather, I only told those who were in the same area as me. There was the case with Sarah too. I know what you're trying to say. Could you not look at me like that? How long are you going to use that, past events, against me? It inevitably took longer to convince them than Prince. But upon meeting Kratia, as well as Sarah, the Banshee, they had no choice but to nod their heads. Humans were quite simple. Even if an individual didn't agree with something, if the majority agreed, then the individual tended to accept the majority's viewpoint. Even Prince, if she acknowledged you, then I should too. So what's your relationship with Prince anyway, Senior Lloyd? All I know is that the two of them think of their relationship differently. What? Lloyd, who'd even gone so far as to send a private message to Prince, was forced to accept the cold, hard truth. Regardless of whether Shin Woo was a good guy or an evil bastard, it was because of him that they had survived. Plus, he now realized that he didn't need to strike him down just because he was an undead. So we can't use the chatting channel anymore? But didn't you already kill the Archmage? All that was left was explaining the current situation to them. First, he explained that, as a result of killing Sigald, the underground sun was no more. They just assumed that the night had gotten longer and that the sun wasn't rising. He then explained what he'd done thus far, which of the 12 generals he'd killed, and explained the details of the final battle concisely. We've been shown there's a chance. A chance that an outsider can enter a domain protected by God herself. Of course, all of the heroes are on our side now and the Lich is dead, but someone else might try a different approach to tamper with the chatting channel. So, he requested that they not use the chatting channel, at least until the Emperor was dead and the Underground Empire was completely purified. What's worse, they could no longer use their permits to access the secret shop, so they were speechless. Man, this sucks. The curse is directly connected to the source of darkness. It'll be difficult for us until we can figure something out. We can't buy the medicine anymore, and what's worse, we can't buy supplies from the secret shop either. That's how it is. Well, it doesn't really matter. Since the final battle is near. To be honest, Shin Woo could always break through the Archmage's curse and enter the secret shop, but he decided not to tell them that. If he wanted to bring them to the secret shop, he would have to form a contract with them. Not only was that a pain in the ass, but the final battle was right before them, so bringing them to the secret shop at this point wouldn't do much, if anything. To put it bluntly, he didn't plan on giving them any important assignments. I've saved up a lot of supplies, so you won't have to worry about that. It's really surprising that you can travel to the surface. How about we go to the surface and group up with Prince? It's a good idea, but it's a bit iffy to bring so many strong people to the surface all at once. He was lying. Shin Woo was 100% sure that if he sent this anachronic human and elf to the surface, then something bad would happen. Thus, he had to do whatever was necessary to stop them from going. Fortunately, Lloyd was persuaded immediately. Is that so? I'd like to purify the undead curse together, but I guess we could all just go up there after the battle's over. Of course, we're really close. Really? Ooh, the surface. I'd really like to see its natural environment. There might be a lot of spirits up there. Ah, now that you mention it. The elf, Aryan, was more attuned to the spirits and nature than Shin Woo was. Shin Woo hesitated briefly, but ultimately suggested, "Senior, would you like to be my partner?" Partner? What are you talking about all of a sudden? Once you've purified the Empire, you'll have to settle on the surface. You're not planning to live dangerously fighting monsters forever, are you? That's where I come in. I can offer you a lifelong job. So, for now, well, you'll see what I mean if you follow me. What exactly are you talking about? She followed him, arriving at the grape vineyard directly connected to their wine factory. He could get there in a flash with the heaven door's key. The atmosphere was completely different, but Aryan quickly noticed. There was no way she wouldn't. No, wait, this is the vineyard I entrusted to you. Welcome, Paul Zero? Oh, it's the elf. It's been a long time since I last saw a living, breathing elf. Nice to meet you. Having noticed him, the dryads flew towards him, but once they noticed Aryan as well, they began to chatter. Whereas, Aryan was dumbfounded at the sight of the dryads. How is this possible? To think there were still spirits within the Empire. Do you remember the Forest of Death? There were some dryads resisting the curse there. I brought them here and cured them of the curse. Because of them, the grapes you raised grew even livelier than before. The Forest of Death. At the time, I remember us talking about it in the chatting channel. If that's the case, then that means you were already strong enough to get through the forest of death back then. Well, yes, Lloyd smiled hollowly. He couldn't even feel his inferiority complex flare. Shin Woo was in a completely different league. When he realized how outclassed he was, something with him snapped. But he actually felt relieved. He'd had an urge to become stronger, and the undead curse had only intensified that urge, making him impatient. However, that impulse had disappeared right then and there. I was a fool. There's no need for me to be more hero-like than someone else. Him not feeling frustrated or powerless was just an example of Lloyd's incredible mental fortitude. Once he'd stopped comparing himself to Shin Woo and looked at himself objectively, he became able to do things at his own pace again. If Shin Woo had known what Lloyd was thinking, then he'd say something like, "He's like a hero straight out of a fairy tale." Wait, the energy from when I raised the grapes is still here. No, it's not just here, but it's evolved. Hey, elf, come over here. There's a place where the grapes aren't growing that well. Spread your elvish energy. It's best if elves look after fruit. I understand. Let's go together. Arian followed the dryads and disappeared amidst the field of grape trees. With the dryads' help, Shin Woo had grown the grapes quite well, but he couldn't match up to an elf. Elves were masters of the forest and fields, so if they were to intervene, then the quality of the grapes would skyrocket. As a result, the value of the Curse Century elemental brandy would rise as well. To think that the sole elf on the continent was looking over the grape trees, she was invaluable. So please do your best, senior. They say that a half-elf is born with an elf's authority. What's with you all of a sudden? Is it that obvious? It is that obvious. Even the most dim-witted of men possessed the ability to spot couples. Compared to when he'd met them last, he felt something qualitatively different between the two of them. They'd taken at least another step forward. At any rate, if this happens, then. By the way, what do you think of one man marrying several women, Senior Lloyd? You have to love one person to the very end. I believe that that's the best I can do as a person and as a man. Ahem, I suppose that's Arian right now. Why are you not like a hero in this aspect? Never mind. It sounded like Lloyd was criticizing him, or at least, it came off that way. Shin Woo decided to change the subject. What do you think of Senior Prince? Prince? She's a good friend. I told you before, didn't I? It would have been hard for me to endure without her. I see. Shin Woo hesitated briefly, but then he glanced at Arian, who was going around the grape trees, and carefully whispered into Lloyd's ear. To be honest, Prince begged me to save you. She was even willing to do anything to ensure your safety. Prince really cherishes me that much. Yes, and Prince is a girl. A girl who's been with you for a very long time. She already told me, so I know that. Huh? Even the slow-witted Lloyd couldn't misunderstand when Shin Woo was spelling it out for him. Cold sweat flowed down his forehead. No, wait, there's no way. Don't joke around, Shin Woo. So you get it, please think about it by yourself. You'll find an answer. Hey, wait, why are you telling me this now? Why now? I can't be the only one with girl troubles, Shin Woo thought. However, Shin Woo didn't say anything aloud and merely gave him a thumbs up. Behind him, Lloyd was suffering from the truth that had been laid bare. Serves him right. Chapter 53, the final stage. Shin Woo had forgotten something, absorbing the Archmage's bone. Once he'd brought Arian and Lloyd to his base, he immediately absorbed the bone. Absorbing the LV8 Archmage, Theotain von Selden's parietal bone. Magic has increased by 120. You have learned the innate element, beginner dark space LV5. Magic has increased by 50. His expectations must have been too high. Though he'd absorbed an Archmage's bone, his magic had only increased by 120. Moreover, Shin Woo hoped that by absorbing the bone, he would master the LV9 high-rank Mana Bone or Mana Acceleration skills. The skills had certainly grown, but he wasn't able to master them. More useless memories, though just learning his spatial magic is huge for me. His magic seems so complex and developed, yet it's still in the realm of enlightenment and elements. But wait a second, why is this? Shin Woo tested the dark space element and tilted his head at the mysterious feeling. It was almost like this feeling was familiar. An absolute ability that linked two spaces through the power of the darkness element. Yeah, this ability was similar to one of Shin Woo's abilities. However, that ability was in the form of an artifact. Shin Woo couldn't understand the inner workings of the ability on his own, but by learning the dark space element, he would just gain the Heaven Door Key's power through his intuition. Dark space and the Heaven Door's key are resonating. You can now absorb the Heaven Door's key through bone reinforcement. Shin Woo widened his eyes. That's right, the Heaven Door's key. When he'd first gotten it, he couldn't absorb it, so he'd given up on it. But he had found a way to absorb it now of all times. What if absorbing it causes it to change in some weird way? The Heaven Door's key has a similar activation mechanism to dark space. At the very least, I'll be able to create a gate just like before, so don't worry. Shin Woo wasn't worried about bone reinforcements, blast area, anymore. The artifact, the Heaven Door's key, reacted to Shin Woo's dark space and kept buzzing. Shin Woo grabbed the Heaven Door's key and briefly closed his eyes. He'd activated bone reinforcement, absorbing the Heaven Door's key through bone reinforcement. Magic has increased by 500. You have completely understood the fusion element, dark space, and the element is accepted by your karma. The unnecessary facets are removed, and the very essence of the element is strengthened. Dark space has evolved into the new innate element, heaven space. The beginner heaven space element has become LV10 and has evolved to the intermediate level. Magic has increased by 100. The dark space element, strengthened by the Heaven Door's key's power, evolved, gaining the ability to merge all elements together, not just darkness. He could not only use this element to transport himself, but others as well. Not only that, his spatial abilities had far exceeded the Lish's now. This wasn't just a transportation ability. The heaven space element could merge his other innate elements as well. In other words, he would be able to use all his elements simultaneously, which would increase his attack power significantly. Game over, huh, Shin Woo, you're being really arrogant. It's your arrogance passive. Ah, right, thanks, Jin. Maybe I already have it as an active skill. Jin's desperate dissuasion kept him from going off the deep end. Now that he thought about it, the Lich had quite the overpowered ability, but he had killed him anyway. Yeah, though he'd finally gained spatial magic, there were several people who could resist its effects. An innate element can only be stopped with another innate element, and all the people he'd fight from now on should have innate elements. There's really no point in arguing over whose ability is better. I have to use this innate element specialty to grasp my opponent's weaknesses. That's what's important. Another point in his favor was that the heaven space element was really compatible with his wildcard skill. The space element was, like Annihilation Flame, the best skill for him to go. I'm here or maybe I'm not. I'm not here, or maybe I am. Combining heaven space with either Annihilation Flame or Dark Shadow, the possibilities were endless. He already had a few ideas. He should get a chance to try them out in the field soon. If he used them in tandem with Wild Card, then an equally leveled opponent, or even a higher leveled opponent, wouldn't be able to easily notice him. Yeah, I guess you could say that I've only just assembled all the pieces. All the pieces? Yeah, our goal is to attain victory with the least amount of casualties possible. But we had one problem before. That we didn't have anyone as strong as the magic and undead emperors. And that's also why you were so hell-bent on upgrading the Titan. Yep, but the Titan can only be used for a short period of time. If something happened, an emergency, there would be nothing I could do. But now, I think I can take them on with this. Shin Woo was a coward. So if he looked really confident, then it could only be for two reasons. First, when there was a clear-cut retreat path, and second, when there wasn't a clear-cut retreat path. Whether he was safe, or whether he was sure to die, there was no reason to worry about both of them. And right now, he was closer to the former. Moreover, having gained heaven space had caused his stats to be 25,323, Level 9 required one's stats to be a total of 25,600. He could reach level 9 with just 277 more stats. If everything went well, he might be able to level up mid-fight. And if he reached level 9, then he'd be on equal footing with those damn emperors. Even I'm a bit shocked. To think that he, who had only been here for 2 years, would be on equal footing with the 2 level 9 emperors that had ruled for hundreds of years. Even he couldn't have imagined this when he had asked God for a growth-type ability. It was only possible by taking everything that they'd built, but it also wouldn't have been possible without his Joker karma. The Joker. There was nothing better to describe him. It didn't just accurately represent his ability, but his position in the world as well. Shin Woo. Right then, the door swung open and Kraisha rushed into the room. She held a small bead within her tiny hands, a small bead that was encased in bone, which resembled a shell of some sort. The Titan core's ready, the energy's fully charged too. Not only can you transform whenever you want, but I think the active duration time has increased by a lot too. It was only natural that the core's capacity would increase when they had fused it with the artificial sun. Shin Woo quietly took it and gripped it. The fire trapped within periodically thumped like a heart. And I'm also finished with the other installation. You did it, you pretty much did everything. Kraisha, it would have been impossible if not for your ability. Shin Woo and Kraisha exchanged meaningful smiles. Jin, in a fit of meaningless jealousy, raked the ground. Shin Woo ignored the tantrum, got on top of Jin and declared. All right, it's great that we finished in time. Call everyone and tell them to gather. It's time for the final battle. Finally, are we assaulting the capital? Nope. Shin Woo cold-heartedly shook his head. Jin and Kraisha just looked at him strangely. In response, he sported his own doubtful expression. Did you really think I'd launch a direct attack on the capital with this many forces? You weren't going to? Obviously not. There's no telling how many of ours will die if we attack head-on now that the sun is gone and the Emperor's power has increased. It made a lot of sense. The undead Emperor, Jizahenu, was monstrous enough to use the source of darkness itself as his life vessel. Unlike the Archmage, the Emperor didn't possess such superb transportation abilities, but if you got in range of him, then you'd start the battle in a whole lot of pain. Even though he had the Golem train and the Thorn Wall was destroyed, they still had to get to the Emperor undetected. Then, our forces will act as a diversion. They'll lure all of the Empire's undead away. The undead, to the surface. Hearing that, Jin wondered whether Shin Woo had gone crazy from all of the stress, or if the undead curse had finally gotten to him from the consecutive bone reinforcements. However, Shin Woo's expression remained serious. Had he seriously gone insane? Jin furtively raised a leg. If it's broke, then kicking it will fix it. She'd never tried it on a person before, but kicking him at light speed should have some sort of effect. I'm not going to invade the surface. You've been by my side for a while now. You can guess what I'm thinking, right? Shin Woo looked at Jin as if she were ridiculous for even considering it, and retorted. Indeed, Jin was always by his side. She'd also heard his thoughts the most out of anyone, albeit indirectly. Thus far, so, you were prepared to fight both sides. You were increasing your forces on the surface, as well as your forces underground. Yep, that's right. I was prepping forces on both sides. Yeah, so, I thought you would use both your forces too. Huh? Wait a sec. I've already mostly figured it out. Unlike Jin, who was tilting her head, Kraisha looked at Shin Woo with shining eyes when he was in heaven-defying general mode. Shin Woo wants to destroy both the surface and underground's imperial armies. Yeah, thus far, we thought Shin Woo's forces on the surface would take out the surface's imperial army and his forces underground would do the same for the underground's imperial army. But he expects fierce opposition from both sides. At this rate, our casualties will be huge. At the very least, weaklings like Lloyd, Arian, and Prince will die. That's right. Even though most of the Magic Empire's 12 generals had died underground, the Underground Empire's 12 generals were nearing extinction, and all of the level 5 or lower undead were all gone. Both sides still retained a significant amount of forces. Both sides retained their elites, the elites that had been there for hundreds of years. He couldn't look down on either the quality or the quantity of those troops. Shin Woo must have never planned on fighting them straight up. Keep going. The forces that you've developed, maybe they weren't meant for fighting. Huh? A diversion. Shin Woo had definitely said that. If that's the case, then Shin Woo's goal all along was the surface and underground's imperial armies. Shin Woo plans on using the heaven-defying general's troops to lure both armies towards each other, causing them to clash. Is that even possible? Jin, who was quietly listening beside them, said stupidly. So the heroes, who risked their lives to fight and grow, as well as the religious order's forces. They were all clowns on a stage? It is. Shin Woo grinned and said. Jin, who was connected to him, instinctively took a step forward. You'll see soon enough. Your Majesty, please listen to the people. The Light General, Sorora von Lilane said so coldly that it felt like he'd fall onto the frozen floor. There was even a curtain within this gloomy, dark room, and the secluded emperor began to murmur to himself. She'd always been cold, but after returning to the surface, she became much more passionate. Her voice felt akin to a hot, sharp edge. He knew why. It must be because his loyal subordinate, Urema Steelworker, had died. To think these two had been in a relationship. Moreover, he didn't think Urema would go so far as to sacrifice himself to save her. To be honest, him dying was only beneficial to him, as Urema's body had gone missing, but he wasn't going to tell her that. I was suspicious that Sigald had stolen Urema's body, forcing him to follow him, but if that were true, then this woman wouldn't have come back alive. He either died, or he was taken by them. The Emperor pondered, but Sorora cut him off like a sharp blade. This is the limit. We can't hold it off anymore. We have to do something. Your Majesty, you are personally needed, or you need to send all of the remaining 12 generals and the remainder of the elite troops. The Emperor groaned quietly. To be honest, the current situation wasn't good for him. Originally, the Emperor was going to wait for the undead curse to spread to the surface. When his people discovered the existence of the curse and became antsy, he would only then intervene. He never had any intention of dealing with the source of the curse. Once he'd taken care of the curse, he'd then create a barrier. It was inevitable that the undead and their energy would seep out of the barrier once more, so the people would come to rely on him once more. The situation's not good. No, it's not. I'm sure you're already aware, since your eyes see everything on the surface. Lilane, are you mocking me? Your Majesty, please leave everything to them. A new voice said. It was a tuxedo-wearing man, with both hands together and on standby near the curtain. It was the Spirit Sword General, Kuren von Begner. He was the most loyal subject of the Empire and was part of the 4 heavenly commanders, the Empire's strongest. He cut his opponents down with his sword, which was hidden in shadow. Thus, he was called the Spirit Sword General and had only become stronger by turning into a vampire. I'm referring to the alliance of religious orders, led by the woman who claims to be Kay's disciple. Force those unsightly fools into your service, and let them and the ignorant people fight against the underground's undead. It's a good chance to shut them all up. Who? Kuren? That's impossible. Unfortunately, Kuren wasn't very intelligent. Did his overzealous loyalty damage his brain? Though he didn't particularly like Sorora, he agreed with her nonetheless. The people are far too discontent. Moreover, they have someone they can rely on. It might work if they and the undead destroyed each other, but if they were to win, then the people would wholeheartedly support the religious orders. No, they were already close to doing so. The limit that Sorora had mentioned was referring to this. If the Emperor waited any longer, and he left saving the Empire to Izuna and the religious orders, then it was entirely possible for them to take his people and form an entirely new nation. This is all because of him, Redidane. If he hadn't caused such a commotion on the surface, then this must have been his goal. Putting the Emperor into a situation where he was forced to intervene or mobilize all of his forces. That's just how much Sigald had wanted revenge. He felt goosebumps, even though Sigald was a lower level than him. It felt as though there was always a sword beneath his neck. Even now, the Emperor felt uneasy, as he didn't know when Sigald would come for him. If I go, then it would be the perfect spot to assassinate me. Even so, we have no other option. Your Majesty, you just told us yourself that you had to intervene. Kuum, the Emperor toiled over his choices. Honestly, he'd rather stay here and hide, with double or even triple the soldiers stationed to protect him. However, that was an unattainable dream. If, by some chance, those two hypotheticals were just wishful thinking. Sigald von Redidane, he's probably still alive. I, too, would like to kill him right away. He can't hide forever. But we can't catch him from in here. We have to go out to do so. And we have to go out to kill him as well. Sorora remarked, as if ignoring the emperor's opinions, yet the emperor couldn't bring himself to say anything. Not only was it the truth, but she was also the last remaining light magician in the empire. She was crucial to stopping Sigald. She, too, knew this fact all too well. Your Majesty, you don't have to worry about a weakling like him. Gerald von Ennard anguished once more. He knew his hand had been forced. The emperor thought about how he could get what he wanted without being coerced. Ultimately, he came to a simple conclusion. You go, Curran von Begner. It was best to not move exactly as your enemy wished. That policy had always kept the emperor alive time and time again. Your Majesty, you'll be my stand-in. I can't just leave here. So I'll leave everything to you. Take the rest of the 12 generals with you, besides the light general, and all the elite troops as well. You must perform better than Izuna and her forces. For a second, the emperor's loyal clansman, Curran von Begner, couldn't believe what he was hearing. But he wasn't hearing things. The emperor had opened the curtain and stared at him seriously. He was confused, but he quickly got on one knee and bowed to him in spite of this. I understand. I will break Sigald von Rededane and Jizahanu, and bring them to you no matter what. You won't be able to beat Jizahanu. However, he won't likely be on the front lines. Kill Sigald von Rededane. He's the one keeping the underground afloat, so if you kill him, then Jizahanu will retreat back underground. Understood. Gerald placed his hand atop Curran von Begner's shoulder. The emperor's lightning bind flowed from his hand into Curwan's body, further strengthening him. This act served two purposes, helping him, as well as forcing his loyalty and preventing insubordination. Sorora von Lilane. Yes, Your Majesty? The light general looked at the emperor with unconcealed contempt, yet the emperor shamelessly gave her an order regardless. You will replace Curran as my protector. If, and I mean if, Sigald comes for me during the chaos of the battle, then the only one who can detect him early enough and respond is a light user. Are you forcing me to stay behind? I am essential to the survival of the Empire. If any harm befalls me, then you won't be safe either. Sorora gritted her teeth and shook. The Emperor acknowledged her anger but wasn't going to try to understand it. Moreover, there's a high chance that Sigald comes for me. Light General, if you truly want revenge on him, then it's best that you stay by my side. Do you really think he can sneak in when you have so many magic traps set up? He went around the Empire eluding even my sight. Do you really think he can't do something more? The sound of her teeth grinding could be heard once more. However, the Emperor trusted that she, as one of his clansmen, as well as one affected by lightning bind, wouldn't be able to refuse his command. I understand. I will do as you say. You disgust me though, so I'll stay this far away from you. Light General, it's an honor that the Emperor requires your services, yet you dare to get lost already. In response to her rage, her body radiated light mana. Curran wouldn't dare approach her and just shrunk back. Though he'd been strengthened by the Emperor, it didn't matter. It might be different for the Emperor himself, but Curran had no way of overcoming the Light General's light. Sorora snorted and said, "You're my stand-in too. Kill all the undead. Make sure they can never tread upon our soil ever again." HMPH, I like the sound of that. Then, Your Majesty, I'll come back after fulfilling your orders. My loyal friend, if you succeed, then I promise to give you a suitable reward. It's an honor. The Spirit Sword General deeply bowed his head, paid his respects to the Emperor once more, and quietly left. The Emperor merely stared at the recently emptied space, but soon closed his eyes and turned his attention to the shaking Sorora. I'll give you a chance to get your revenge. I promise you, I would have liked it better if that chance came quicker. Sorora said hatefully and seething with rage, and then turned around. The Emperor's gaze was automatically fixed onto her back. Her elegantly curved body, having no signs of age, her captivating, flowing hair, and her scent, all of which remained unchanged even after becoming a vampire, aroused him. However, he wasn't stupid enough to go after a woman who just lost her lover and was filled with malice. Yes, a rose had thorns, but these thorns were filled with poison. Where are you going? I was given an unexpected mission, so I have to go and prepare. Surely you can stay here by yourself for a short while? Of course I can. Return after you've prepared yourself. 2 hours should be enough, right? HMPH. She snorted, as if she could see right through him, and left. He wanted to force her onto her knees with his lightning bind oh so badly, but for some reason, it didn't work on her. Perhaps it was due to her element. There were so many facets of her that were displeasing to him. I should dispose of her once Redadane's been dealt with. I can just nurture another light user. Sorora, who'd left the Emperor's dark room, dusted her body off as if something dirty had gotten onto her. She then rushed over to her residence. Within her bedroom, which only she could enter, a single small bird awaited her. How did it go? No, it was a golem in the shape of a bird. Moreover, a young woman's voice came from the golem. Sorora, as if she'd done this a few times already, walked over to the bird, or ram, and smiled elatedly and said, "The Emperor's doing exactly as you said he would. I'm ready to open the gate whenever." "That's perfect. We'll take care of the rest. I'll leave the rest to you. Hero Izuna." Of course, her voice, coming from the golem, was a bit delicate, but it was unmistakably the vigorous voice of a young woman. "Since I'm fighting for the one I love as well." The hero Izuna, or Yi Jin Jin, spoke with the light general and sighed lengthily. They were in the very same mansion that Shin Woo had visited before. "Her drive's really scary. I talked to her across a long distance, yet it feels like the temperature's gone down 10 or so degrees. What I want to know is why she's so willing to betray the Empire, the same Empire she's protected for so long. So much so that she's even willing to risk her life. She must have some weird circumstances, Senior." Yi Jin Jin turned around and sighed deeply. Prince had been watching the conversation from behind her. Prince, who had summoned a small fire demon's hand and had been juggling a fireball, stopped and tilted her head. What kind of circumstances? She was always more concerned about the Empire's people than her loyalty to the Emperor, and it was complicated enough with a relationship involved, but to sum it up, she's taken Mr. Shin Woo's bait and become one of our allies. Mr. Shin Woo said he'd used a magic formula that replaced her love with anger. It almost sounds like that magic actually exists. However, Prince acknowledged it. She didn't know how Shin Woo had caught the light general, but she had indeed taken the bait. There was no reason to doubt this. "Then it'll soon begin. You have a huge responsibility, don't you? Can you do it properly? If you can't, then I, your dependable senior, can help you out." "No, I'm fine." Yi Jin Jin smiled confidently, but once she saw Prince, who was shaking like a newborn fawn, she shook her head with a stiff expression. Rather than entrust Prince with any sort of responsibility, it would be better to use a golem instead. "Since Mr. Shin Woo entrusted this to me, I'll prove to him that I'm not incompetent and I'm good enough to walk beside him. But it seems like you've been caught by Junior as well. That's why I'm so happy. The fact that I've been caught and that I'm not letting go." "Oh, is that so? What beautiful love." She hadn't expected that. Prince had no choice but to nod and take a step back from Yi Jin Jin's energetic voice. Yi Jin Jin's emotions were too profound for Prince to understand, as she was still emotionally immature. Yi Jin Jin snorted and smacked her chest a couple of times, calming herself down. Now, all that was left in her mind were Shin Woo's instructions. "You have to take control of the army. The Imperial Army will, of course, resist this. That's when it gets real. You don't need to control them completely, you just need to lure them in a certain direction." Yi Jin Jin truly thought that Shin Woo was a genius. Had he been planning this ever since he'd first come to the Underground Empire? It didn't matter if he did or didn't, she was astonished nonetheless. She was even more shocked by how that plan had developed. "We're splitting up the Underground's undead forces into two groups. The good undead and the bad undead." "What the hell are good undead? Are they my juniors undead? They either won't attack us at all or will pretend to attack us. Of course, we have to play along. The problem's the bad undead. The Underground Empire's Imperial Army. So we have to." "Exactly." Yi Jin Jin nodded her head. "We have to lure them to the surface's Imperial Army. It shouldn't be too difficult since Mr. Shin Woo can use Fire Shadow to communicate with both sides." It still sounds really tough. But it doesn't sound impossible. How many of those innate elements does my junior have anyway? It's so unfair. Getting both the surface and the Underground's forces in one place was more than half the battle. All that was left was killing the rest. This was the most important task. They had to succeed no matter what. Then, don't we have to draw out the Emperor somehow? Junior's only making him more afraid, which will make him more likely to hide. We're the ones in trouble if he comes outside. Not only is he level 9, but he also possesses an innate element. There's a chance that he could mess with Mr. Shin Woo's carefully constructed scenario. We can include or exclude him in the plan, it all depends. And right now, we pick the latter. Then what about the Emperor? The Emperor? Yi Jin paused. She hesitated, as if she was thinking about what to say, but soon continued quietly. Her head was slightly bowed and her face was red with embarrassment. Mr. Shin Woo said he'd take care of the rest. He said he'd use the Light General to set up a gate and that he'd use said gate to drag the Emperor underground. He's going to drag the level 9 Emperor underground. Can you even do that when your enemy is a higher level than you? That's why he left the Light General beside the Emperor. I don't know the details, but I heard that by using both the Fire Shadow and Heaven Space innate elements together, you can substitute a person's body for a gate. Junior is already fighting somewhere beyond my imagination, huh? Prince sported a far-off expression. She had only just learned of the entire plan. Li Shin Woo would do all the important stuff alone while the underground and surface gathered in one place and performed for him. It makes absolutely no sense, but I can't complain. Mr. Shin Woo is actually more delicate than people give him credit for. He'd rather put himself in danger than let his allies endanger themselves. He's so cool. Sounds like Junior just picked the most rational choice, but as a result, we weren't given anything important to do, since we're nowhere near his level. No, sorry, never mind. Prince had acknowledged the difference in their abilities, but the timing wasn't great. Since Yi Jin's enthusiastic eyes continuously lost their fervor. Get a grip, Yi Jin. If we fail, everything's over. Your job's most important in cementing our positions as heroes and protecting the Empire. It has nothing to do with strength. That's true. That must be why Mr. Shin Woo gave me this job. Yeah, exactly. Good. She somehow managed to cheer her up. Prince sighed in relief and Yi Jin forcefully stood up. Her battle dress, the phoenix's feather, swayed, discharging a weak heat. It seems like everyone's gathered already. It's finally time. Senior, let's go together. All right. Though they were technically excluded from the important mission, it didn't mean that they were completely immune to danger. After all, luring the undead and fighting against them wouldn't be an easy task. She might even die this time. In spite of her fire demon training, she may be hit by a stray arrow or spear and fall. However, let's go. Okay. The two left the residence side by side and went to the assembly area within the capital. And there, elite priests and paladins from the sun god religion awaited them, as well as the elites from the various religious orders that they'd allied with. And the one representing the Imperial Army was HMPH. You're quite good looking. One of the Empire's 4 heavenly commanders, Curran von Begner. Befitting one of the Empire's strongest, he was powerful indeed. However, Yi Jin, who shouldered the people's will, and had grown immensely in such a short period of time, was around mid-level 7 in terms of strength. And with Li Shin Woo's artifact, she could handle Curran, so she remained undeterred. You're pretty enough to seduce 2 men at once. I wonder how strong you are. Can you even swing that spear properly with those thin arms of yours? Unfortunately, you're not good looking yourself. Are you called the Spirit Sword because of your dark face? What? Right now, Yi Jin was neither the childish junior hero nor Li Shin Woo's girlfriend. She was the hero Izuna, who had taken her master's place due to his untimely death. The rumors regarding her, Lawrence, and Kei's 3-way relationship were really convincing. And thus, the story that Izuna arose, angry at her lover's death, had originated from here. You impudent wench, you're just a peasant, yet you think you're able to go around the capital due to your affiliation with the religious orders. This is only because the Emperor allows it. I'd rather you prove your skill with your sword, rather than your mouth. If possible, towards our enemy. Or is the Emperor content with waiting until the undead run rampant on the surface? Isn't that why we're fighting? Kuheim, and a hero must always be confident. Even if their opponent is a heavenly commander, who's representing the Emperor. Her level 9 battle dress, as well as the great spirit that resided within her, the level 8 Zenon, supplemented whatever she lacked. Though Curran had just recently been strengthened by the Emperor, he wouldn't be able to take her down. Damn it, Why'd I, His Majesty's representative, have to worry about a mere wench? And why'd I have to act more cautiously around these peasants? But he had already been warned by the Emperor, as well as the Light General, who had warned him several times. If he were to fight Izuna here, then whether it was justified or not, it would result in the complete collapse of the royal family's power. The citizens had already sided with Izuna and the religious orders. Sigald von Rededane, you bastard! How did you manage to unite so many humans in such a short period of time? It was truly frustrating to admit, but Izuna was right. He would need to prove his abilities with his sword, not his mouth, against the invading undead. Only then would he be able to ensure the stability of the Emperor's rule. All right, I'll do just that. I'll put you in your place. I represent the sovereign of this great empire, the father of the nation, His Majesty. My words and actions are equivalent to His Majesty's. I hope you do. It doesn't matter to me, so long as the undead are all destroyed. It had been revealed early on that Izuna only pointed her flames at those who threatened the safety of the empire. How great it was to sacrifice such dirty power to accomplish such a lofty goal. Her words had a profound effect on all those present. Yuu, Lady Izuna. Lady Izuna will protect the capital, no, the entire empire. Lady Izuna, Lawrence, and Sir Kay must be blessed by God. I'll believe in you, Lady Izuna. Hooray for the Sun God religion. Hooray for the Sun God religion. Their reactions were tremendous. Izuna inwardly smiled at the cries of the capital's citizens. This was the effect of Li Shin Woo's lecture. What's worse, she had memorized Li Shin Woo's screenplay and had just been following it, yet at this moment, her command skill was growing. Then, the Pope of the Sun God religion approached her and whispered. You talk just like your master, Kay. I'll ask one last time, you weren't in some sort of strange relationship with him, right? You might not want to hear it now, but keep this in mind. If we want to oust the Emperor and take control of the Empire, then we can't have a scandal like that. If you break up with Lawrence at the last minute, then things will become really complicated. You get it, right? Of course. I love Lawrence. Then, that's enough. I'll believe in you. Your relationship with Lawrence has to last a long time. Please don't worry, Pope. Li Shin Woo was both Lawrence and Kay, so she wasn't lying. She grinned at the Pope, who was already looking past the battle, and raised her head. Lady Izuna. Izuna, please protect the Empire. Will she be able to do the same things Sir Kay could? She locked gazes with countless people. There were those who trusted her, those who hated her, and even those who used her to project someone that wasn't here. But honestly, she didn't care about any of it. Ever since she'd come to the surface, she'd fought for only one man and one man only. And she would continue to do so until the very end. Let's move out. The fake hero raised her voice and said, Today we restore peace within the Empire. She was the Spirit Princess, the Spirit General, and the Spirit Springs contractor. The immortal, a never-before-seen species, Dana, suddenly raised her head. She'd gotten the signal. Ever since she'd come here, she'd been waiting for that signal. The hero is calling us. It's time. Xenon's gone to the front. Yeah, I feel like Paul Zero's calling us. The Spirit Spring spirits had prepared for battle as well. No, perhaps they had waited for this moment over any other. Their hatred and anger towards those who'd abandoned and imprisoned them. They had nurtured their anger and hatred until it was ready to explode. Are you all ready? You remember what he said, yes? We know. I'd like to kill all the humans, but I know that we can't. As the spirits were abandoned by humans, their anger was indiscriminately directed at all of mankind. But if they weren't careful, then they would bring ruin to humanity. Li Shin Woo had used their anger to goad them on and had turned their anger towards someone else. He limited their targets and had reset their goals. As a result, in order for our descendants to live on the surface, we must side with the humans. We'll act like we're on their side. We'll give the humans who embrace us another chance. If they accept us, that is. But we can't forgive the Emperor and his associates. The spirits, all pumped up, each had something to say. Yeah, that was plenty. Dana smiled and turned around. Cinia flew beside her. When's our turn? When can we meet Paul Zero again? We have to wait a little longer. When the humans begin to despair and start praying for their salvation, that's where we come in. To disavow the Emperor and all that's under his control. As expected of Paul Zero. He's trying to change everything with one single battle. But still, the Empire's vast. Though this battle will determine the fate of the Empire, if the battle takes place in an isolated location, it will be difficult to overturn the common perception that has developed over many years with just one battle. Yeah, Cinia agreed and gazed at the spirits that filled the spirit's spring to the brim. Right now, they were divided into two groups. One group would participate in the battle between the humans and the undead in order to restore the spirit's status, and the other. The rest of the Imperial Army's elites will be in this battle. Miss Jin made it that way. Therefore, the forces protecting the cities, the soldiers and the knights commanding them, are minimal. That's probably true, but those soldiers won't attack us, right? Not only are the soldiers citizens of the Empire, but attacking them will cause the people to hate us more, no? You're right. That's why the golems are going to attack the Imperial Army. Seeing Cinia's head tilt, Dana smiled faintly and continued. The hero, through Rem, has already taken control of all the golems within the Empire. With the addition of his innate elements, even the Emperor cannot retake control over the golems. Those golems, which are spread all across the Empire, will attack the Imperial Army all at once. How do you think the people will react? They'll lose all faith in the Emperor. But so many people will die. It's ultimately all just an act. Our true goal isn't the soldiers, who are just following orders, but the vested rights of the ruling class. The golems were ordered to execute the corrupt nobles and knights only. And after killing them, the golems will act like they're turning against the people as well, but then. That's where we come in. Exactly. We'll destroy the golems and save the people. If we maximize the spirit spring's mobility and the golems match our movements, then it's certainly possible. It'll be quite the show. You're actually calling it a show? It was just a poor show. However, it would still fool the people. When the golems drew near, the appearance of the spirits, who would appear like lightning and rush to their aid. Contrary to the Emperor or the nobles, who were afraid of the spirits' power and ostracized them, the people were taught that the spirits were wrongful existences. The nobles that had abandoned them and the spirits that had saved them, it was clear which side they'd choose. Even more so once the Emperor and the nobles that had abandoned the spirits were out of the picture. But Dana, you must know that even if things go according to plan, there's nothing we can do about the resulting casualties. They truly are unavoidable casualties. If we took into account the lives of each and every soldier, then we wouldn't be here right now. The hero is also aware of this fact. Wow, Paul Zero will really go to hell when he dies. Don't worry, I'll follow him down to hell and assist him. Dana, you still don't know Paul Zero well enough yet. One day, Paul Zero will control hell too. Oh my, it'd be well worth assisting him then. Haha. The two women smiled meaningfully and turned towards the spirits. Their power then simultaneously took control of the spirits. Everyone, get ready. The stage that the hero has prepared for us. It requires our very best acting. Chin up, everyone. This is the first step towards our future. Whereas, Shino Rendu was speaking to his own troops, though its purpose was different. Countless Pauls were following him. And there were countless more undead following behind them, trying to kill them. Is that the fastest you can go? If you're that slow, then those undead bastards will catch us. No, sir, we can run even faster. Obviously, the Pauls were undead, so their stamina was limitless. To be more specific, of the two domains that governed one's body, defense and stamina, stamina was essentially limitless. This was why it was so difficult to face an undead in combat. If the undead weren't able to catch them now, then they would never be able to catch the Pauls in their game of tag. Honestly, this short play of theirs had gone on for 2 hours already. Thousands of Pauls were being chased by tens of thousands of undead. What's worse, their pursuers' numbers were continuously increasing. We'll kill all of the underground's undead. We'll erase all proof of the curse's existence. Us. That's our job. That's what Paul Zero ordered us to do. For Paul Zero, his great goal of purifying the entire empire. All of our efforts have been for this. Lord Paul Zero, we're right here. They uttered such nonsense that it was difficult to distinguish whether they were his troops or a part of his fan club. Regardless, the Pauls continued to run diligently. They looked quite funny, but the result was by no means a joke. Looking back, Shino Rendu was shocked. To think that I would be able to do something like this. No, This is also Lord Paul Zero's will. He really is amazing. No one could have ever imagined it. To think he'd both be the one who caused the war that would decide the continent's fate, as well as the one who would end it. Through this battle, Shin Woo was attempting to eliminate all of his enemies on the surface and underground, and simultaneously eliminate all sources of the curse. That was also the reason that he'd ordered the Pauls to lure so many of the undead over. Not yet. We haven't gone east yet. Draw out all of the undead hiding about. Bring out all of the undead that are snooping around the city walls. You cowards. The heaven-defying general is calling you. He told us that he'd take you to the surface. Follow us. You poor souls who've lost your egos. We will bring you true salvation. Kua. Obviously, this was happening all across the underground empire. Shino Rendu was but one of the brigades luring the undead. There were also a small handful of elites with exceptional aggro abilities that lured thousands of undead towards them. Shin Woo had meticulously divided the underground empire into parts and had sent his Pauls off into different locations. He'd ordered his Pauls to lure the undead to the surface. Several of the heaven-defying general's corps were currently fulfilling this order of his. Though their locations and their destinations differed, the result would be the same. They would lead the undead to the surface. Before proceeding with this mission, Shin Woo had dug several passageways to the surface. He had set up these regional passageways so that they would gather in one single location. The golems had been helping him with this for months now, leading all the underground's undead to the surface, and bringing them peace once they get there. All would dance upon his stage. What was the difference between them and Shino Rendu? At the very least, Shino Rendu knew what his role in all this was, and he had been prepared for his role beforehand. It's ironic. They had dreamt of returning to the surface, but they'll be killed after getting a taste of it. The relationship between Sarah von Redidane and Shino Rendu was also ironic. When they were still alive, nothing he said got through to her, yet after dying, they became true comrades. Though she rejected me outright, and our goals are a lot different from when we were still heroes. Thinking about this now is pointless. He was getting emotional. It was unlike him. His personal feelings weren't anything compared to Paul Zero's orders. Only by following his orders could he obtain that sweet revenge he'd been waiting for. Shino Rendu smiled bitterly, urged his skeleton horse to run faster, and yelled to his troops in a booming voice. This is where it all starts. Once we get to the surface, we have to act like we're on the same side as them. Remember what Lord Paul Zero told us. We're going to push them to peaceful salvation, Lord Paul Zero's salvation, and thus, peace will be restored to the empire. It really was a religion. A true pseudo-religion, one where the believers had to sacrifice themselves. Shino Rendu, who wasn't aware that he was one of them, just smiled bitterly. But then, before they had even moved out, the hero Lloyd was screaming. Shin Woo went to the Imperial Palace by himself. What are you even talking about? Didn't you say we were going to fight against the Imperial Army now? Oh, so you didn't know yet. My bad. Whereas, Kratia, who was responsible for explaining the battle to them, expressionlessly struck her forehead, and began explaining whilst retaining her expressionless face. We're going to follow him slowly. While Shin Woo keeps the Emperor busy, we need to drag out all the forces within the capital and lure them underground. Will that even work? It will. Kratia, with the mana radar that Shin Woo had entrusted to her, as he said he didn't need it anymore, discerned that a huge amount of undead were moving and smiled slightly. You'll see soon enough. Shin Woo created a hand mirror using the metal element and checked his appearance. It was perfect. He looked exactly like the Archmage, Theotane von Selden. But will it really be alright, Father? If the Emperor is aware of the Archmage's death, then... Kai Paul asked worryingly. By reaching level 8, Kai Paul had not only grown substantially in terms of power but had also gained disguise abilities second only to Shin Woo himself. Thus, he was the best choice to accompany him to the capital. Ironically, Kai Paul was currently disguised as a normal undead. Of course, he wasn't any normal undead. It was more precise to call him an undead hero. Shin Woo knew, from the Archmage's memories, that the Archmage enjoyed using the undead heroes as guards. Thus, Kai Paul was disguised as an undead hero. All the other 12 generals were dead and the Emperor likely knew this as well, so even if he wanted to impersonate one of the others, he couldn't. Although the Archmage pledged his loyalty to the Emperor, he doesn't trust him. The Emperor knew this and respected him anyway. Because of this, their relationship was able to last. You're saying that? The Emperor doesn't know about the Lich's death. He has no way of knowing. Of course, he'd be suspicious of the Archmage's absence, but how long has it been since I killed the Lich? It's only been 4 hours. Moreover, before then, the Lich left, stating he'd take care of the heroes. He wouldn't suspect anything in that short period of time. Of course, Shin Woo, who had got going right away, had killed the Lich and had brought the majority of the undead heroes to his side. However, if he were to go to the capital right now, it would be him, returning to the capital, not infiltrating it. I can finally act like a human, yet I have to take this form. I'll turn you into a perfect human someday, so just wait a little longer. Because the Archmage didn't ride a horse, Jin was currently disguised as an undead hero as well. She looked very much like her human form, but because she was undeadified, she didn't seem to like it very much. Only a very, very small portion of her body had bone or muscle exposed, yet she hated it anyway. Whether it be one cheek or one shoulder exposed. At the very least, he had left her legs intact so that she could move properly. Moreover, she had covered her body from head to toe with silver steel, so she didn't look like an undead at all. I'm not pretty. It's fine. You're plenty pretty to me. I'm not kidding. You really are. Then can we kiss? Nope, no thanks. You want to die? Jin gritted her teeth at Shin Woo's firm refusal and practiced walking. She'd been a horse for so long that when she took on her current form, she began placing her hands on the floor. However, she was quickly able to adapt, perhaps due to her authority, and was soon able to move quickly on her 2 feet as well. Shin Woo confirmed that she was able to move on her own, nodded his head, and said, "You guys just need to stand a short distance behind me. You don't need to say anything. Since we're now entering the heart of enemy territory." Shin Woo exhaled, even though nothing came out, and relaxed himself. Of course, he was no longer afraid of the Emperor. This was nothing more than the nervousness of an actor before he got on the big stage. While he was at it, he might as do it perfectly. There were so many unknowns on this stage, so if he were unable to do his job properly, then it would be a pain in the ass later. If he died, he would revive due to invisible heart, but he couldn't revive others. He knew he would revive if he died, but he'd rather live than die. He obviously had so many ways he could survive. If he didn't want to live, then he could always die later. But he couldn't do that right now. Alright. Let's trick them to the very end and come out alive. Peeved, that's so like you. Sounds good. You sure have weird taste. Then. Father, excuse me. Jin grinned and came closer to Shin Woo. Kai Paul, looking apologetic, came closer to him as well. Shin Woo nodded his head and softly swung his hand. Then, just like with the Archmage, the flow of mana connecting the 2 spaces formed and sucked them in. They were immediately transported to the capital, inside the palace, the most dangerous area within the capital, at that. Once they were transported, time began to flow once more. This was proof that Shin Woo both understood and could use the time element better than the Archmage. Hooray for bone reinforcement and innate elements. Archmage? Once they arrived, they faced their very first obstacle. It was the last of the Underground's 4 heavenly commanders, the general who'd killed the Sun Spear General, who had been one of the surface's heavenly commanders, the Heaven-Sundering General, Leofield von Terriman. By absorbing the Sun Spear General's bone, Shin Woo had already seen Leofield's spearmanship, as well as his other skills. But it was different seeing him in person. Isn't it obvious, Duke Terriman? Everything you say reeks of sweat. The huge undead came over, and although Shin Woo was nervous from his appearance, a Death Knight, he replied exactly as the Archmage's memories indicated. He was huge. Now it made sense that people wondered whether he inherited a giant's blood or not. His body was covered in muscles, and these muscles, despite him becoming undead, pulsed and wriggled with cold blood and magic, as well as the air element. The pressure he emitted was so great that it felt like it could stab him to death. He's on the same level as Sigald? No way. Though Sigald's swordsmanship may surpass Leofield's, if he compared the degree of perfection of their bodies, as well as their training, then Leofield was superior. He could completely understand why all the spearmen he'd come across had yelled Leofield's name. Did your job go well? Huh? I'd appreciate it if you stopped looking at me like that. Are your ears starting to fail now too? Although the Archmage and the Heaven-Sundering General, as two of the four heavenly commanders that pledged their allegiance to the Emperor, respected each other, they possessed a slightly troublesome relationship where that respect wouldn't show outright. As they had reached the pinnacle of their respective arts, magic versus martial arts, they were prideful in their arts and frequently clashed with each other. However, the Heaven-Sundering General's reaction was a bit strange, considering how he was following the Archmage's memories to the letter. Are you really the Archmage? Something's strange. What's strange is your brain, Duke Terraman. It was always strange. Has it finally completely rotted away? No, I'm not the one who's strange. The smell is strange. Strange. It's strange. Shin Woo shuddered. Once his acting skill had passed the level 20 mark, no one had ever seen through his acting or disguise skills. However, the rumored musclehead was suspicious of him. What the hell happened? No, he had no time to be thinking. If Leofield was suspicious of him, then he'd bring it up to the Emperor as well. He had to stop him. You're already stupid enough, but if you keep saying the same thing over and over again, you'll become even stupider. Tell me, what's so strange? The actions of the heroes? The anti-skull led by the damned Sigald? If not, then the heavenly commanders that came from the surface? I'm talking about you, Archmage. You're strange. My intuition is telling me that. Your intuition? You really like that, huh? I was always fed up with that intuition of yours. I hate how you do things without any logic or evidence. You're right, I've always trusted my intuition. Even if he were to bring up their shared memories, it wouldn't work. The Heaven-Sundering General took out his spear and gripped it. And once he gripped his long, gray spear, the atmosphere inside changed completely. When one reaches level 8, they gain an authority, the ability to treat the ambient mana as their own and absorb it. However, the way they go about doing so differed depending on the individual. The Heaven-Sundering General seemed to be able to absorb the surrounding mana with his spirit alone. If I'm wrong, I'm truly sorry. But I feel like something will go wrong if I don't do this. I have to do this no matter what. If His Majesty questions me, then I'll accept it without question, but I don't have any choice right now. Heaven Flash. It was sometimes used to describe lightning cascading through the air. If so, then why was it used as the name for Leofield's attack when he used the air element? The answer was exceedingly simple. Hate me if you must. The moment he'd thrust his spear, it had already reached its target. All you would see was a lightning bolt shooting towards you. The shock was akin to getting struck by a lightning bolt. The Heaven Flash would kill anyone equally. And that's where his title of Heaven-Sundering had come from. Critical hit. Even the Archmage couldn't dodge this. It was impossible for Shin Woo too. Even if he tried to teleport away the moment Leofield went to grip his spear, preemptively attacked him, used the Annihilation Flame to erase his presence and confuse Leofield, or used all of his innate elements combined, the best he could do was turn the spear's trajectory. He wasn't 100% confident that he could dodge Leofield's strike even with all that. That was the Heaven Flash. And that was the Heaven-Sundering General, a level 8 that had surpassed the limits of a level 8. Thus, you really are the Archmage. Are you satisfied now, you blockhead? Shin Woo didn't move at all and let himself get hit by the Heaven-Sundering General's attack. Leofield's strike had pierced through his armor and bone. Even Shin Woo found it a bit laughable that there was a spear dangling in his forehead. I'm really sorry. This is the first time my intuition's been wrong. The Heaven-Sundering General calmly removed the spear and apologized. To be honest, Leofield hadn't attacked with the intention to kill. He had just wanted to see if the Archmage was the real deal or not. Why? Because the Archmage didn't need to dodge his attack, as his soul was stored someplace else. Even so, it would take a considerable amount of time and mana to restore the Lish's, body, so Leofield had held back so that he didn't destroy the Lish's entire body. This was only possible because he was the Heaven-Sundering General. The first time? Duke Terraman, this is your second time. The second time? Ah, that's right, that was the first time. Shin Woo had wisely brought up one of their shared memories. This was an elaborate ploy to ensure his opponent's trust. Despite the situation, the Heaven-Sundering General smiled lightly and said, "The first time I saw you, I was sure that you could cause harm to the Emperor. So I attacked you back then. Back then, I wasn't a lich. I really would have died. I can say this now, but you're the only person in this world that could counter my attack that way. It's hilarious that I'm saying this now, but I've always been amazed by that magic of yours. HMPH. I'll find a way for you to repay me later, so just get back to what you were doing. The battle where we wipe out those dirty invaders is nigh. We have to mobilize all of the capital's troops. Of course, for the Emperor. For the Emperor. The two exchanged hot glances and passed by each other. Leofield hurried, as he needed to gather the troops in time, but Shin Woo needed some time to treat his wound. He naturally slowed his pace. The high-rank regeneration skill has become LV7, and health and magic have increased by 20. That asshole, he's so strong that my regeneration skill went up by 2 in one go. A skill that refused to level up at that. You're cursing him out even though your skill leveled up. Your acting was perfect, father. Anyway, that guy's really scary. The Heaven Sundering General. Shin Woo recollected the Heaven Sunder General's attack, as well as his intuition. That was close to busting him, and trembled. But he couldn't help but laugh. It was only natural. The Emperor would come to harm due to the Lich, huh? That guy's prediction is right on the mark. I can't tell whether you're making an evil expression or not since you're a skeleton. Remember that. I can change my expressions as a skeleton now, you know? Want to see? This looks really evil. Hey, stop. I said stop. The party joked around and then refocused themselves. They went towards the final battle. The undead emperor, Jizahanu, was waiting for them. For hundreds of years, the giant hall was kept clean through the emperor's magic, and it was in this hall that Shin Woo met the emperor. There were guards standing beside him, but they were pretty insignificant to both the emperor and Shin Woo. But there was something striking. The throne that the emperor sat on. There was also a small magic circle set up behind it. Shin Woo knew about it, as it had been set up by the Archmage himself. It was a door that led to the cave where the source of darkness was hidden. It was paramount that he took control of it. In a sense, doing so was more important than dealing with the Emperor. Your Majesty, Theo, the Emperor's voice was dismal, yet emitted powerful energy. Shin Woo sensed the unconcealable magic from within his voice. It was exactly as the Archmage remembered, but experiencing it firsthand was. As expected, this was a true level 9. LV9 Lich Emperor, Jizahanu von Ennard. Compared to the Magic Emperor, who used his lightning bind to meet me indirectly, and the Garuda, which had been eaten away by the curse for so many years, severely weakening it. The undead Emperor's power is completely different. Shin Woo smirked. This is how powerful he was when there was only a slight difference in their stats. No, that was impossible. After meeting the level 9 Emperor, Shin Woo recollected something. Levels wouldn't increase by just accumulating stats. One could only grow by reaching a certain level and proving themselves worthy. Thus far, Shin Woo hadn't acutely felt this phenomenon because all of his feats had been more than enough to level up. He had never hit a wall before. That's how it's gone so far, but will it be so easy this time? Well, I'll never know until I actually reach 25,600 stats. Until then, I have to just try my best. Like right now, no, even more so. Unlike the pressure he was emanating, the Emperor gazed at him with drooping eyes. When they locked gazes, he desperately began to think. The moment he seemed surprised by the Emperor's power would mark the end of the line for him. Contrary to the Heaven Sundering General, the Undead Emperor was, in a different sense, a natural enemy to Shin Woo's acting skill. I took care of a majority of the heroes. But there were a few rats that slipped through my net. But I found out that they had an unexpected connection. What we feared has come to pass. How are they connected? It's Sagald. He used the Metal General, who has ties to the surface, to form an alliance with the surface. Ooh, Shin Woo said, as if sure of its validity, and the Undead Emperor interjected for the last time. I'm afraid of him. I feel as though he's trying to change something from within me. His loyalty to me hasn't changed, yet he's completely different from you. What is it, my wise friend and teacher? Do you know what that is? You already know the answer, Your Majesty. My clever Emperor. He dared doubt you and wanted you to become exactly how he envisioned. That's nothing more than perverse loyalty. No, it's stubbornness. Theo, I'm scared. The Emperor said weakly. If the other heroes, who assumed that this guy was the final boss, were here, then what would they think? They would just be speechless and click their tongues. I'm afraid of the surface. I'm afraid of everything that's left me behind and change. Your Majesty, you rule over all that changes and all that doesn't. Do you really think so? My friend, do you really think that's true? If you wish for it, then time itself will stop and bow before your feet, Your Majesty. So what is it that you are so worried about? My friend, I'm afraid of changing. Shin Woo was silent. He thought, this guy's like a hikikomori, but there was nothing he could do about it since it was the main trait of the undead. It was actually kind of sad. Even a level 9 undead, with such great magic and status, was the same as any other undead. He suddenly felt as though Sigald was amazing, as he had broken free of those shackles. It was such a relief that he'd already killed him. Your Majesty, you're already a perfect existence. No one can dare match up to you. I'm not so sure. Perhaps I've already changed. My friend, why was it that I so ardently longed for the surface? Why was it that I wanted to get my revenge on Gerald so badly? He's the reason we're down here. It's because he stole the light away from us. But now, I feel so comfortable with this darkness. I don't want to leave. Every day, I imagine myself ripping Gerald to shreds, but even though I can go through the barrier, I can never bring myself to do so. My friend, where did I go wrong? What did I do? Your Majesty, the Emperor had only just realized that the undead curse he'd developed had a fatal flaw. But unfortunately, he couldn't turn back time. That's because undead, as a species, could not move forward by themselves. They not only couldn't move forward, but they also couldn't look back at the past either. The dead, they had lost not only their lives but also a path to follow. Thus, they couldn't go forward, nor could they go back. But Shin Woo was here. If there wasn't a path, then he just needed to make one. That's too much, Your Majesty. Shin Woo did his duty as the Archmage and calmed the Emperor down. Though he had reached level 9 and become transcendent, the Emperor wasn't capable of escaping his fate as one of the dead. Thus, his statement was mixed with a small bit of pity towards the Emperor, Jizaenu. You can do anything you wish, Your Majesty. Taking a brief respite within here is your decision, so all of creation must abide by your wish. When you decide to leave here, then everyone will follow and support you. Theo, please don't doubt yourself. You are an existence which has obtained great karma, yet you also transcend existence. Since you haven't forgotten about your revenge against Gerald at all, if Gerald were to appear before you, then wouldn't you raise one hand and crush him, Your Majesty? That, of course. The Lish's encouraging words caused the Emperor to stand straight up and agree. Normally, the Emperor wouldn't move an inch, so the sudden movement caused the Emperor's guards to flinch. They should have noticed by now that Shin Woo wasn't the Archmage. My desire for revenge hasn't left me. Not at all. My friend, you spoke well. Although I felt comfort in the darkness, that doesn't mean my desire for revenge has disappeared. On the contrary, no matter how many days or years go by, my desire for revenge still remains strong. That's right, Your Majesty. That hasn't changed at all. Well, it shouldn't. He was an undead after all. This emotion, rejecting change, was an undead's most powerful emotion, and this emotion was controlling the Emperor as well, so there was no way he'd be able to escape its binds for even 1 second. The Emperor, who cradled this cursed feeling like it was a blessing, was so pathetic that it was hard for him to continue looking at him. Is this what a fight was supposed to be like? He had a bitter taste in his mouth. He chewed on some bone powder. Then, what will you do if I, your humble servant, skeleton, have a solution to your plight? A solution? The Emperor tilted his head. Contrary to Leofield, the Emperor hadn't doubted Shin Woo from the beginning. It couldn't be helped. After all, that was what Shin Woo was all about. If I can bring Gerald before you, then what will you do, Your Majesty? Bring Gerald before me. The Emperor slowly reiterated his question. He couldn't even imagine it. The Archmage had never said something like this before, but, you would bring Gerald, who's hiding on the surface, before me? Yes, Your Majesty. It took me quite a long time, but I've become able to do that now. I prepared, and developed, my space element for this very moment. I know how extraordinary your space element is. So with that power, you can finally get through the barrier and, It was only possible through your grace and the source of darkness. So, this is also your karma, your majesty. Is that so? I see. So you're saying that it's because of me that you were able to go through the barrier. The emperor accepted his magic-tinged words as the obvious truth. That was the power of instigate. The instigate skill has become LV10 and has been maxed out. Others perceive your lies as truth. No, it becomes the new truth. Magic has increased by 50. By mastering one of the Joker's innate skills, your other skill's growth rate increases. One of your karma's conditions has been fulfilled. He had mastered one of the Joker's innate skills. At that moment, Shin Woo's, non-existent, heart thumped and pleasure spread throughout his entire body. The 50 magic increase wasn't important. There was a more fundamental and extreme change that was affecting his very existence. I'm not far. Not far from what? He couldn't tell. However, Shin Woo thought that instinctively. With the stat increases from regeneration, his total stats were now 25,412. All that was left were 187 stat points. However, there was something more important than stats right in front of him. It was waiting for him to figure out what it was. Oh, Your Majesty, are you dreaming of snails? Whereas, on the surface, the Light General was watching the Magic Emperor, looking at him as if he were hopeless. She spoke impolitely, but the Emperor wore all sorts of defensive equipment that had been in the palace's treasury. And if that wasn't enough, he had wrapped scrolls engraved with all sorts of magic formulas onto his body. Thus, the Emperor's authority was still powerful. Everything will end soon, since our forces should be clashing with theirs now. Yes, I heard that too. The Imperial Army will take care of everything. They'll take care of everything before the religious orders even have a chance. I trained my soldiers so diligently for this very moment. Sure, and that was exactly what the hero, Izuna, had been hoping for. The Magic Emperor seemed so pathetic that the Light General felt like she'd click her tongue. He should already know that the undead were not to be underestimated. After all, none of the vampires he'd sent previously had come back alive. Despite that, the Emperor was sure that his soldiers and knights, as well as the 12 generals, would be able to take out the undead without any difficulty. But where exactly did this confidence come from? He was definitely relying on the negative effects of becoming an undead. Then again, I'm not much different. A long time ago, I was willing to sacrifice my own body to get my revenge. Then, at that moment, she shuddered. The alarm magic formulas that she'd set up prior had just gone off. A thick smile appeared on her face. She spoke tiredly at the Magic Emperor, who seemed to become more and more like a snail, which had found a large house to wander around in. Who? Rather than acting so foolishly, why don't I accompany you? Really? I know you're suspicious of me. So shouldn't I be trying to gain your trust in a time like this? It's regrettable, but we both seem to be acting in the best interests of the Empire. I've never once questioned your loyalty. Ah, of course. The Magic Emperor had always desired her, but she had always narrowly escaped his grasp. He couldn't go after her when Arama Steelworker was still on the surface, as he couldn't hurt his loyal retainer. But when he abandoned Sorora and went down underground, Sorora had immediately married another man. And she eventually became a widow. Despite that, the Emperor couldn't give up on her. He convinced her to become a vampire so that she could eventually be with Arama, and ultimately transformed her into a vampire. At the time, he thought he was almost there. The vampire that created another vampire. In other words, the children would always think highly of their father. Moreover, he was able to forge a deep connection with her through Lightning Bind, so it was easy for him to force a relationship with her. However, she was barely affected by him, even after becoming a vampire, perhaps due to her light element. Thus, the Emperor was forced to give up on her. But to think that she, who had rejected him for so long, had accepted him so easily. I can pretty much tell what you're thinking, but I can't let you do everything. Oh, of course, I can't do something shameless to a virtuous woman like you. Everyone said that in the beginning. In the beginning, at least. The Emperor decided to magnanimously accept her fussing. But he never knew when Sigald would strike, so he didn't strip off all of his equipment. He only de-equipped a few pieces of excess equipment and briefly took off the scrolls that would impede his movement. This all doesn't matter much anyway. Sorora, who was watching him, noted that he looked more and more hideous. Even so, she didn't let it worry her and she approached him. After all, saying a few things he wanted to hear would allow her to get close to him without him being suspicious of her. Then, shall we go to bed? Yes, Your Majesty. The Emperor's hand touched Sorora's shoulder, and a black flame shifted to the Emperor and blazed. Huh? This is called Fire Shadow. You can either transfer your power to your contractee, or you can use magic through their body. Since heaven space or a space-type element is mixed into it, it proves that the underground heroes have grown beyond our wildest imaginations. Sorora said, her face had already become black flame. Soon, even that flame shifted to the Emperor. Even if he tried to deal with it with the darkness element or lightning bind, it was difficult, as Sorora was facing him. Sorora, who had always rejected him, was using that link between them to her advantage. The deep darkness that linked the two of them was getting in lightning bind's way. What is this? Kook. Then, I hope you have a good night, Your Majesty. The Emperor could say no more. The fire's shadow that came from Sorora engulfed the Magic Emperor and had erased him from his current location. Sorora, now alone, was quite pale, but she hadn't died. I thought it had burned me too. Was it a lie? Well, whatever. There are still some things I need to do. Of course, she trusted the heroes, but the Magic Emperor may return, so she decided to destroy the place that he could return to. Light erupted from her hand. After she, with a joyous expression, had vaporized the Emperor's bedroom, she began to destroy the rest of the palace. The target of his so ardently desired vengeance was right before him. The Archmage had been so confident in his endeavor that Jizahenu was momentarily stunned. However, he soon realized what must be done and began to act. Gerald d. Kook, Jizahenu. How? What the hell happened? Whereas, Gerald, who had been waiting to hear the good news, had fallen into hell. Compared to Jizahenu, he hadn't grasped the situation right away. That allowed Jizahenu to make the first move. Kahak. Gerald, I wanted to see you. I really wanted to see you. This, Jizahenu, even if it's rotten, it's still a herring, huh? Once Gerald was struck by Jizahanu's darkness, he got a hold of himself and began to counterattack. Dark lightning crackled, gathered around his hands, and shined. Just because he possessed lightning bind didn't mean his combat abilities were low. He was a vampire, a species that specialized in magic and regeneration, and had also nearly mastered his lightning element. I don't know how you brought me here, but Jizahenu, bringing me before you was a huge mistake. Have you forgotten? Long ago, you weren't able to beat me. By becoming an undead, have you forgotten about my strength along with everything else? I remember, Gerald, I remember it as if it were just yesterday, how ruthless you were to me and my friends. But time has passed, so much so that it feels like we were playing house back then. And it seems like you've become an undead too. How hilarious. That's right, it didn't matter what they were thinking before, or what intervened. Now that they'd met, they would have no choice but to fight until one of them died. The Magic Emperor's lightning clashed with the Undead Emperor's darkness mid-air. Contrary to Gerald, Jizahenu was a magician that had maxed out his darkness element and used it as his standalone element. Thus, his darkness was far greater than Gerald's lightning. HMPH, you've been immersed in this darkness and have become quite close with it seems. Now I'll show you that lightning can even tear through that darkness you hold so dear. Kook. Gerald soon realized that if he kept using the lightning element, he'd lose, so he began using his lightning bind. Shin Woo wasn't aware of this yet, but lightning bind was a perfect battle ability. With lightning bind, Gerald transferred all damage dealt to him to those connected with him, and could steal their magic, health, strength, and agility to bolster his own stats. That was the true power of lightning bind. The Magic Emperor hadn't fought on the front lines thus far, so he'd never had a need to use it that way. However, lightning bind reinforced the darkness element's ability close to its limit. If he could use lightning bind properly, that is. Kook. Why, I can tell what you're trying to do, Gerald. However, this is my palace. Jizahenu mocked him. You probably erected a barrier around your palace too. Did you think I wouldn't do the same? How did you? I was always one step behind you, but it was my barrier that allowed for the creation of this empire. And for the past several years, I've strengthened that ability again and again. Though there was an unfortunate incident a short while ago that destroyed a part of the barrier. When the light blast had struck the capital, the undead emperor had been extremely confused. He was nervous, thinking that perhaps Sigald truly intended to uproot the entire empire. However, there was one good thing that came out of it. As the undead emperor no longer needed to maintain the barrier, he was now able to conserve some of his mana. He didn't obsess over remaking the damaged barrier, and instead focused on reinforcing the palace's barrier. It had turned out to be a wise decision. Even if Gerald used his lightning bind, its effects couldn't penetrate the palace's barrier, thus stopping him from affecting or being affected by others. Kook, Jizahanu, you dare, you. Gerald, shall we play? We have plenty of time anyway. No one will be able to interfere. The aftermath of the two emperors' magic had already erased the palace's guards from the face of the earth. The palace was completely empty. Of course, there was no way that the archmage, Feotane von Seldin, would be affected. Feotane may be skilled, but he cannot intervene in my battle with Gerald. Moreover, linking the space between the two palaces must have taken a heavy toll on him. I'm so thankful to him. I hope he got away safely. Then, he heard a commotion from afar, outside of the palace. The archmage probably knew he would be of no help and had decided to command the troops in his emperor's stead. Since Gerald wasn't the only enemy they had to face right now. No, this was where things would truly begin. The battle between the undead and the dirty humans on the surface would begin in earnest. The archmage should be able to lead their troops to victory on behalf of the underground empire. While our troops fight, let us also fight to our heart's content, brother. It reminds me of so long ago. You disgusting? Fine, I'll take you on. Let's see who's superior. The two emperors clashed once more. As they were both level 9s, the ambient mana vibrated mercilessly. But due to Jizahanu's barrier, within the hall, the ruckus didn't escape the palace's walls. They were dueling for supremacy. Because of that, Shin Woo was able to move a bit more freely. I can't believe you're so calm, even after seeing that. I have to be calm. They're both freakishly strong. Whenever they attack each other, their bones creak, and they hurt each other. How can I not be calm? At the very least, neither one of them will win one-sidedly, so I won't have to take over. Man, the Magic Emperor, Gerald, fights a lot better than I expected, Shin Woo muttered under his breath, and Jin just stood there, dumbstruck. I was worried that both Gerald and Jizahanu were both hikikomoris, but it seems like they're a good match. Maybe it's because they're both hikikomoris. Wow, look at that mana splitting in the air. If I grow just a little more, then I could create stuff with just a speck of mana. I don't even get what I'm looking at. Just looking at it makes me shake. The extremely compressed magic clashed repeatedly within the air, but it actually wasn't very flashy. Whenever their magic clashed, they would cancel each other out, and the barrier prevented any impact. It's just, despite that, Shin Woo couldn't make light of their battle. Anyone who could wield mana should be able to feel it. How powerful Jizahanu's Sphere of Darkness, as well as Gerald's Black Lightning Bind were. Wow, this is really informative. As expected, they didn't waste their time over the years. Then again, there was a lot to learn about the Archmage's magic too. Damn, I'm on the cusp of mastering Mana Acceleration and Mana Bone. So you're just going to sit here and keep watching that lecture on mana? If I could, I would, but, TCH, I guess I can't. Shin Woo wanted to watch the view while eating some popcorn, but unfortunately, he didn't have that much free time right now. For the time being, Shin Woo had used the Annihilation Flame to erase their presences, so no one noticed them. Normally, maintaining Annihilation Flame wasn't very difficult for him. Because his Annihilation Flame had reached intermediate level 2, he was able to pull off this imitation. I know where it is and I pretty much know how to open it now, so let's go. Man, it's really tough to move around with both Wild Card and Annihilation Flame on. I'm more surprised that we can move around right under their noses. Shin Woo had summoned Gerald to fight against Jizahanu and buy him time. He'd already done that, so what else was left? Obviously, he needed to destroy the Source of Darkness, also known as Jizahanu's life vessel. If Gerald managed to kill Jizahanu, then Jizahanu would resurrect at his life vessel. Not only did he have to finish things before then, but if Jizahanu managed to kill Gerald, then he'd noticed an abnormality with his life vessel and come to stop him. Either way, he needed to destroy the life vessel ASAP. In other words, Timing was paramount. It really befit a hero's last mission. Damn it, if I didn't have this overpowered ability and had an overpowered stealth ability instead, I'd be able to take care of this easily. How overpowered would it have to be for you to be able to resolve this situation so easily? Not sure about the level of being right in front of God, but her not noticing me. Isn't that the level of a god? He claimed they didn't have any spare time, yet they moved towards the location of the magic circle while hypocritically joking around with each other. It seemed as though Jizahenu felt that his own life was important, as he fought centered around his throne. However, Gerald was no pushover, so he was continuously forced away from the throne area. With Shin Woo's wild card, which allowed him to completely understand the situation, and Jin's agility, which allowed his movements to border on foresight, they avoided everything and arrived in front of the magic circle. Oh, wait, where did Kai Paul go? Didn't you bring him along to use as a meat shield if things got dangerous? Are you crazy? I'd rather die once than use something that precious as a meat shield. Then why did you bring him? I gave Kai Paul a really important job. Yep, it's really important. Quote ellipsis question mark. Are you using Fire Shadow right now? Why are you using it now? A portion of Shin Woo's hand was tinged in darkness and burned quietly. Seeing that, Jin tilted her head. Shin Woo just smiled bitterly and said, I'm doing that. You mean that thing where you transfer your powers to someone else? Does it really matter if you transfer your combat abilities to him? It matters, because I'm not transferring my combat abilities. Huh, Jin tilted her head, but then, a man, who looked exactly like the Emperor, yelled in a booming voice from outside the palace. The time has come, my loyal subjects, stand up, it's time for us to take revenge on those who imprisoned us within darkness. You, obey His Majesty is leading us personally. It's a holy war. To war. The elite soldiers and knights seemingly became intoxicated from each and every one of his words. No one doubted the Emperor's appearance or words. A black flame briefly erupted from his shadow, but no one had seen it. All of the Imperial Army's elite troops marched from the capital. Lloyd and the hero squad encountered them, and they all rushed towards the exit set up within the level 5 danger zone. This was the hardest one to dig up. It was like building a tower and breaking through the ceiling. Segald hadn't had a deep understanding of Fire Shadow, so he'd only used it as a convenient transportation ability. However, Shin Woo was different. He was not only well versed in both fire and darkness, but also commanded scores of subordinates and could commune with them. Therefore, Shin Woo could use Fire Shadow to turn his subordinates into little Shin Woos. If he slightly adjusted his abilities and applied them to his subordinates, then what would happen? That's right, it would be hell on earth. Your enemies aren't here, are the undead. Enemies are the humans. Do you not see those contemptible humans gathered on that vast plain? Do you truly not see those humans, who brazenly live and breathe on the surface? Of Shin Woo's many loyal retainers, one of them, Shino Rendu, yelled out in a booming voice. Just a little while ago, Shino Rendu and the Pauls had been roaming across the underground empire, spewing all sorts of insults towards the undead. They had finally passed the long underground passageway. To be honest, they were afraid of the existence of the barrier, not the barrier itself. Once they passed through it, they felt like it wasn't really a big deal, and had gotten to the surface, all while maintaining their hostile attitude towards the undead. So, the fact that Shino Rendu was going around talking like this sounded ridiculous. However, humans, he's right, it's the humans. Attack the humans. We can't attack our brothers, fellow undead. Don't shoot, they're allies. Kill the humans. Their healthy skin, their flowing blood, and their pulsing hearts. Let's kill all the humans and turn them into beings like us. The underground undead, which had followed them and seemed willing to give up their skulls to kill the Pauls, had surprisingly been persuaded by Shino Rendu's speech and turned their sights to the humans. Shino Rendu's attitude had changed so suddenly that even the Pauls, which had been luring the undead, were stunned. To think our commander had that kind of ability. Maybe he gained a power that resembles Lord Paul Zero's by following him. It makes sense. Lord Paul Zero truly is great. Not many had noticed the black flame shadow beneath Shino Rendu's feet. Even if they did, it didn't matter. Since there was only one person in this entire world that could figure out the principle and the result behind this ability. You guys listen up too. From now on, we'll arbitrate the battle. Don't die. Save everything that should be saved and kill everything that should be killed. This is the order of the heaven-defying general, Lord Paul Zero, the sole man to crush and overturn the heavens. Yu, Paul Zero, Paul Zero, Paul Zero. Lord Paul Zero has given the command. It's time to bring order back to this land. We've finally found land where we can live in peace. Keep following him, he who led us all the way to the surface. Show him that we can be victorious in any battle. The Paul's cheers wouldn't abate and just got louder and louder. Though they may have started at different areas, the other Pauls began to join them. Even the underground undead were affected by Shino Rendu's magnificent instigate and acted like they were possessed. They were fooled by him and didn't know up from down, and soon stood at the forefront of the battle. If the Emperor, the Archmage or Sagald had seen this, then they would have gone crazy. Shino Rendu had taken control of so many of the underground empire's undead so easily. However, this would have been impossible if not for Shin Woo's ability. It hadn't been easy. All forces, listen up. Whereas, on the opposite side, the hero Izuna was raising her voice as well. We've come here to protect the surface, and to prevent any more pointless deaths. We must protect ourselves from the undead that seek to do us harm, and protect our wills as well. All who live within the Empire are its master, so we must work together to protect the Empire. You, Hero Izuna, you're already a hero. Indeed, we, who live in the Empire, must protect it ourselves. Praise be the sun. Hooray for the sun god. Hooray for the sun god religion. Hooray for the hero, Izuna. While Yi Jin Jin was orating with such a booming voice, there was, of course, a black fire blazing beneath her feet. Her magical speech, which seemed to bedazzle even her allies, had even gotten the Pope of the Sun God religion to lose his mind momentarily. What exactly is happening? Did Kei remain as a vengeful spirit since he wasn't able to do everything he set out to do and possess Izuna? We've arrived at the Setoni Plains, Pope. We really have to focus now, since the undead have already begun advancing. The Setoni Plains was the location that Shin Woo had chosen for the final battle. It was closest to the underground's exits, while also being incredibly vast and suitable for battle. Also, there weren't any innocent civilians nearby, so there wasn't any risk of the undead curse affecting them. Therefore, for all these reasons, Shin Woo had tasked his forces to lead the underground's undead here and fight. Ultimately, everything had gone smoothly. The board was all set according to Shin Woo's specifications, and Shino Rendu had already completed about half of his plan already. Obviously, Shino Rendu, who was in command of the Pauls, as well as the hero squad, were retreating after leading the undead here. That's why it had been possible for them to gather all these undead in one area without them getting away. There were some people who found this strange, but their doubts were wiped clean due to Izuna. They needed to kill them all, so it wasn't bad at all that the undead had conveniently gathered in one place for them. You undead, yeah, we have to take care of the undead. Hyuk, there really are a lot of them. But it's okay, we won't be in much danger. Huh? Now that you mention it, it does seem that way. Yi Jin Jin grinned and said, and the Pope briefly tilted his head. He soon nodded his head in understanding. Of course, the Pope didn't know of Shin Woo's true identity, an undead, or what his forces were comprised of for that matter. However, he somewhat knew what tactics the hero, Izuna, was using, and had even given her advice on certain facets of her plan. It was just that the undead force was much larger than he'd anticipated, so he had forgotten all about it for a moment. I can't bear to see those religious orders do whatever they wish, especially that ridiculous sun god religion. We, the Emperor's loyal clansmen, are the ones who will protect the Empire. The people only live on because of His Majesty's grace. The Empire belongs to His Majesty alone. Now is our time to prove that. Of course, for our great Emperor, for the Empire. Then, as if refuting Izuna's grand speech, a part of their forces broke away from the battle line. The Imperial Army had broken away from the main force and had rushed towards the undead. From the very beginning, the Imperial Army had only acted like they obeyed Izuna, but had one goal and one goal only: being the only ones that would distinguish themselves in battle. They had lost their temper and ran in recklessly, as if Izuna's speech had gone against the very foundation of the Empire, as well as damaging the Emperor's dignity. And that was exactly as Izuna, no, Shin Woo had planned. But what will you do if they aren't able to do a significant amount of damage to the undead? It's good for us if the Emperor's forces are cut down, but there's no point if we sustain more damage as a result, no? Please don't worry, Pope. Where do you think my strength comes from? Doesn't your power come from your ability and your artifact? Hyuk, is K actually still alive? To think that the Supplementary Story Volume 7 The Resurrected Flame and Izuna's Unconcealable Ambition was based on a true story. Please tell me in detail where that book is sold later on. She had already collected all of the books featuring Lawrence and Kay as the main characters, but she hadn't known about the supplementary stories. Yi Jin asked him with such a serious expression that the Pope was momentarily overwhelmed. He meekly nodded his head, and Yi Jin cleared her throat and continued. Obviously, I don't get my power purely from the sun god. I also can't wield flames by myself. No matter how great the artifact is, do you really think that I would be able to wield such flames because of it? If that's the case, then, is that it? You've surpassed the realm of humans and you're using the spirit's power? Yes, as expected, the Pope was no fool. He hadn't gotten a single read on K, but after watching Yi Jin's abilities for a while, he'd formulated several ideas. It was just that he knew that Yi Jin wasn't a bad person, and above all, he had kept his mouth shut as she was beneficial to the sun god religion. He truly was a utilitarian person. I'm borrowing the power of the spirits. As I thought, I even thought you might be a spirit yourself, but that wasn't the case. You're borrowing the power of a spirit, huh? About that, what do you think? While he was always concerned about profits, he wasn't by any means a miser. After all, as Pope, he worked for the believers of the sun god. To think that a spirit would once again help a human. I'm very thankful. Yi Jin's sudden question should have caught him off guard, yet the Pope answered seriously. Of course, as an individual with a high post, he was somewhat able to piece together what had happened long ago. The humans, no, the leaders of the empire, magicians, were only concerned about maintaining their power, so they ostracized the spirits. I can't even begin to comprehend what the spirits thought at the time, as they only regarded humans as their friends. Despite that, not only did they not seek vengeance against mankind, they decided to help us by bringing someone like you to our side. This must be the sun god's will. Yi Jin's phoenix's feather blazed fiercely at the Pope's words. It was proof that Zenon had an intense reaction to the Pope's words, regardless of whether it was positive or negative. However, Yi Jin guessed that they weren't negative feelings. As expected of you, Pope. You're no normal person. Of course I'm not. I was the one who discovered K after all. Did you forget? The Pope wrinkled his eyes at Yi Jin's admiration and replied slyly. Of course, it was more correct to say that the Pope had arrived at just the right time for Shin Woo to use him, rather than him discovering him, but Yi Jin didn't mention that and just grinned. Are they? No. Are you all trying to use this battle to re-establish ties between humans and spirits? Yes. I'd like for that to happen. It's a bit late to be so frank with me, but... Well, I guess it's not too late. Make sure your results show. The Pope spoke, remaining ever so calm, and raised his weapon. An intense flame could be seen at the tip of it. If you don't fulfill your mission, then I'll take care of the rest. A world of humans and spirits. It sounds quite nice. Yes, I believe it sounds quite nice too. Yi Jin replied, smiling, and raised her javelin. She infused fire into it and threw it. The largest battle between the undead and the humans, the curtains for the greatest play had finally risen. While the two emperors staked their lives on their brotherly spat, Shin Woo released the magic circle, allowing him access to the passageway that led to the cave where the source of darkness was stored. What's surprising was that neither Jizehanu nor Gerald had noticed him doing so. His annihilation flame was plenty overpowered. It's quite narrow. It really is. It's way too narrow. Hey, you sound excited. Nope, not at all. I have no idea what you're talking about. The two entered the cave. The cave was incredibly dark and was narrow enough that a person would find it difficult to pass through. Therefore, Shin Woo and Jin were forced to stick right next to each other. Lately, Jin became noticeably excited whenever they engaged in skinship. Because she was currently in a form that closely resembled her human self, he couldn't help but feel anxious. But he supposed that that wasn't really important right now. This is all evil eye, or So that's why you're picking all of the ore and feeding it to your Titan core. That's all well and good, but weren't you the one who said we should hurry? Not only were the cave walls lined with ore that was suffused with thick darkness magic, but they were all connected to the center of the cave. In other words, they were connected to the source of darkness. And if one were to enter this cave without permission, then the one in charge of this cave, the Emperor, would know they were here. But because Shin Woo had maxed out his darkness element, he could completely ignore it and feed all the evil eye to his Titan core. It was all too easy for him to hide his activities from the Emperor. The Titan's all I can rely on if we find ourselves in a pinch. So long as I have this, we won't lose. Yeah, I got it. I wasn't complaining. Let's just get going. Shin Woo had already explained the new Titan to Jin already. When she'd first heard about it, she was worried that it might not even move properly, but Shin Woo had been so excited that she decided to accept it, albeit bitterly. Moreover, he said he needs me to operate the Titan, so... will it really work? I'm a little happy that he brought me all the way here. I guess this really isn't the time. I really have gone crazy. Jin knew how severe her condition was. This was all Shin Woo's fault. He's the one who'd told her that she could become human again. So, it wasn't her fault at all. Jin thought to herself, whilst changing her expression again and again. Seeing that, Shin Woo became speechless. However, he didn't point it out. He was busy enough picking the evil eye ore from the surroundings and feeding it to the core. But good things couldn't last forever. Everything has an end, and the cave had an end to it as well. There was a small clearing at the end of the cave, large enough for them to take a breather, as well as a small bead at the center, which was small enough to fit in Shin Woo's hand. LV-10 Source of Darkness, Lich Emperor's life vessel. Holy shit, is it because there's a ton of mana in there, even for you? Can you really handle this? To think I'd get in so easily. It doesn't make any sense. I thought there would be a level 10 Steve here or something. You didn't come here to screw around, did you? Did you? At this point, she couldn't tell whether Shin Woo was happy or sad about this. After retorting, she sensed something approaching, so she raised her arm and protected him. Her arm was instantaneously covered in dozens of layers of armor. Right after, she caught something, causing the layers of armor to shatter into thousands of pieces. It was a thick spear, as I thought, followed by a weighty and serious voice resounding throughout the cave. It was a voice he'd heard just a little while ago. My intuition was right all along. To think you'd try to destroy the Empire. It seems like you're not the real Archmage. I guess I'll never be able to look him in the eye. Bro, why are you coming out from there? He was so astonished that he couldn't help but retort. He briefly wondered whether he was seeing things or not. LV-8 Heaven Sundering General, Leofield von Terriman, Elite Death Knight. That's right, the Heaven Sundering General, Leofield von Terriman, blocked their path as if he were protecting the source of darkness. My intuition's always been good. It's as if the wind spirits are whispering in my ears whenever there's danger. Whenever I sensed danger, all I needed to do was follow those whispers. Obviously, there were no such spirits around Leofield. It was the same this time too. Even though there was no mistaking that it was the Emperor speaking and commanding the troops, I felt a sense of déjà vu. Something felt strange, I was sure of it. However, I could not test His Majesty as one of his loyal retainers. I didn't know what to do, but then, the wind led me here. Just now, he then thrust his spear towards them once more. But this time, Shin Woo blocked it himself. Leofield's spear and his death god's shining bone sword clashed, causing his sword to creak. Yet, he was able to push him back with his blade. Truly a formidable spirit and strength. The wind led you here. As I thought, you have an innate element of your own. To think there was a guy who'd gone with the flow of the second act at the very last minute, everyone having innate elements. Shin Woo was absolutely speechless. He had been so relieved that the undead emperor hadn't had an innate element, yet here he was, facing off against Leofield who had one. Following Sigald's annihilation flame and the Archmage's dark space, it was a space-type innate element. Maybe an innate element is a foothold. God herself wields the time element, so maybe combining time and space is a realm above the gods? Shin Woo's mind briefly focused on that very question. However, the Heaven Sundering General, who'd reached the peak of martial arts, noticed this and thrust his spear to finish him during his lapse of attention. Leofield's spear was surrounded by a wind that could cut through space itself. This thrust was backed by his trained, transcendent body and his magic. Anyway, I think you're misunderstanding something. Kook. Shin Woo easily repelled Leofield's thrust. He used his assimilation skill with Jin, who was standing right beside him, to add her agility to his own. Actually, it wasn't all because of his assimilation skill. The manatization skill has become LV9, and health and magic have increased by 40. And thus, his stats had reached 25,493. He only needed 107 more stat points to reach level 9. What? Just a little while ago, you didn't have such strength. I made it, or should I say, I switched it with my overwhelming magic stat. Shin Woo extended his hand, grabbed onto the spear, which was facing his sword, and forcefully pulled. With manatization, he had converted his 10,000 or so magic into strength, which resulted in such power that he felt like he could squash an entire mountain, allowing him to easily steal Leofield's spear away from him. Kahawk. There, Leofield's eyes widened, but Shin Woo just gripped the spear, unconcerned. The artifact, which was created by using the most precious metal in the Empire, infused with the Archmage's magic, and had achieved so many feats with the Heaven-Sundering General, as well as transcending its limitations and growing, was futilely crumpled up within Shin Woo's hand. This can't be. The reason I let you live was because you're needed on the surface to make the battle look realistic. What am I supposed to do with you now, you blockhead? You're not. Yep, I'm not afraid of you one bit. Sorry, but you can't beat me. I guess you could call it a dog's death. In the past, Dana and Sarah had warned him again and again about the dangers of the Heaven-Sundering General, Leofield von Terriman. Of course, at the time, Shin Woo had just laughed it off. And just a short while ago, he could somewhat understand what they were talking about. He was sure that if he were exposed, then it would all be because of this guy. So, he was definitely one scary bastard. However, he wasn't worried about his power, only his intuition. Shin Woo wanted everything to go perfectly, so he'd been wary of him. At the very least, he needed to not be exposed until he had tricked the Emperor. I'll die a dog's death, you say? Yep, his play was already a success. So even if Leofield were to block his path, if Shin Woo were to use his full power, then he actually found it quite hilarious that Leofield would be so willing to attack him when he couldn't even gauge the difference in their strength. He wasn't even level 9, yet he wanted to defeat him? He had mastered 3 elements, wielded 6 innate elements, and even had manatization as well. What a joke. I don't even need to use the Titan to beat you. If you wanted to even give me a bit of a hard time, then you should have come for me before I killed Sigald. If you came then, you might have had a chance. Yeah, you might have even taken 2 of my lives. That cannot be. My spear was tempered so that it can be used to protect His Majesty at all times. Sorry, but I don't have time. You've really wasted a lot of my time already. Shin Woo wasn't going to listen anymore. At any rate, the target was huge and the space was large. He launched a shining bone sword, piercing through Leofield's body. Obviously, one of the heavenly commanders wouldn't fall from just one attack. Because of that, he launched 20 more of them, which he'd prepared earlier. It was simple, so long as he used the Darkness Element's Link ability. Then, the Heaven-Sundering General obviously disappeared without a trace. You have hunted a member of the 12 generals, the LV8 Heaven-Sundering General, Leofield von Terriman. All contributing heroes gain 50 million perium and all stats are increased by 100. You have acquired 15 permits to God's secret shop. Proficiency in all combat-related skills has increased significantly. Through God's grace, the Invisible Heart skill's maximum level has increased by 6. The Invisible Heart skill's level cannot be raised any higher. You have not yet met the conditions for a level up. You must prove that you are worthy of the karma that you have chosen. As he thought. He'd definitely reached the 25,600 stat benchmark, yet he hadn't leveled up. This was the first time he'd ever experienced this, so he was a bit perplexed, but he could understand why it happened. He'd been gaining stats so quickly. On the contrary, he was more surprised that he hadn't gone through any obstacles when leveling up in the past. But it was okay. He could still win with ease. Just now? Ah, you mean killing him? It was easy since I stole his weapon and attacked while he was confused. Is it really that simple? That's the truth, so how else can I explain? I already told you how to take advantage of your opponent's openings, right? If he were acting whilst fighting, then no one would be able to distinguish between his truth or lies. Then again, it was because he had the proper abilities to support his acting that made it so flawless. Because he was far stronger than the Heaven Sundering General, his bluffs were more effective than usual. The Heaven Sundering General could do nothing but lay down and die. Truthfully, his dramatic actions had confused the Heaven Sundering General and prevented him from moving, and he was soon able to strike him down. Even so, Jin wasn't able to comprehend what he'd done, even though she had been watching from right beside him. She was shocked by the sequence of events spanning a few seconds, as well as how naturally and quickly he'd killed the Heaven Sundering General. Shin Woo, you can talk all you want later. Let's focus on what's in front of us. Shin Woo focused on the burst of mana that he felt from outside. As expected, the Heaven Sundering General dying inside here had let Jizahenu know that there was an intruder. Thus, he tried to get over here immediately, but Gerald had seized that opportunity and counterattacked, turning the tides. This wasn't good. If Gerald managed to kill Jizahenu, then he'd appear right in front of them. Hey, can't you just use the Titan to kill both Gerald and Jizahenu? You never know. What if, after killing them, a level 10 Steve shows up? You really like Steve, don't you? Jin threw a fit, yet she readied herself to protect him anyway. In the midst of this, Shin Woo finally placed his hand on the life vessel. Then, a truly huge amount of mana flooded his body. Shin Woo could feel it. That this wasn't something he could just absorb. That he was totally screwed. Gwa. A wail resounded throughout the battlefield. Who exactly was screaming, and for what reason? Those fighting couldn't discern the source of the scream. But whenever that beautiful, frightening, unforgettable, and horrific scream resounded throughout the battlefield, someone died. Someone would collapse, and someone else wouldn't be able to move. Sarah had gotten over her past as a hero, and continued to wail as a banshee. She continued to wail. Shin Woo was also increasing her strength. A shadow of black flame covered her entire body. With the help of Shin Woo's wildcard skill, not only did her banshees cry buff allies, but the effects were further increased as well. This way, Kaik, I killed one of them. Let's go. Their allies were weaker and their enemies were stronger. The knights, who had suddenly led the enemy forces, died due to their trivial mistakes. And that allowed the allied forces to regain the lead. If we just hold out a little while longer, then reinforcements will. Our reinforcements will. Lord Paul Zero has commanded us. Don't discriminate and kill them all. Give them the death that we all wish for. The allied forces were stronger due to their extreme change. If they got even the slightest of leads, they wouldn't allow their enemies time to breathe. The allied forces' blades would always, without fail, cut off their heads or pierce a vital area, while the enemy's blades would flounder in the air. Some of them even managed to embed their swords into their own bodies. How can this be? It's too one-sided. Is that the power of a banshee? How is a single banshee doing this to our entire army? The vampires were dumbstruck by the spectacle. Ignoring her tears or her wails was easy enough, but they noticed that wherever her voice reached, there was an increasing frequency of deaths. Her voice brought death to the enemy, but it also continuously strengthened the heaven-defying general's troops. Moreover, the range of her screams was by no means ordinary. To be honest, the reason that Shin Woo could be absent from this battle was because he could rely on Sarah's authority. With Fire Shadow's effects, you can just cry and influence the progress of the battle however you wish. I told you, out of everyone, my ability has the highest affinity with you. Unfortunately, it's something I never wished for. It's too late for you to go all Tsunere on me at this point. In any case, I'll leave this to you. If Yi Jin's my representative for the human side, then you're my representative for the undead side, not Shino Rendu. Who, of course. So, I was just wondering. Are you and Shino Rendu? Though you've become my master, you cannot manipulate my emotions as you please. Why, you may be able to do what you want with my body, but... You dirty and underhanded bastard. Hey, I never said I'd do anything of the sort. I respect your independence, you know. Shin Woo recalled his conversation with Sarah prior to the battle and smiled. To think he'd be laughing at a conversation with such an infuriating person. He felt that he himself was strange, but he couldn't help it. He just laughed automatically. Goohee, hoo, hiik, the banshee's crying, she's looking at me, we're going to die, right now. She continued to scream, but she now wore a smile on her face. Sarah became even stronger than before, and there were even some soldiers that fainted at the sight of her. Despite the fact that several of them were undead. Sarah, what exactly are you? Whereas, Lloyd and the heroes, who had accomplished the most difficult mission of leading the undead here, why exactly was it the hardest job? Not only was the average level of the Underground Empire's Imperial Army incredibly high, but the passageway from the capital to the surface was the most perilous, had disguised themselves as a volunteer army that attacked the main force's rear. In the midst of that, Lloyd's eyes widened at Sarah's power. Do people change that much when they become an undead? Perhaps. Love also might have changed her. Ah, I see Prince over there. She's become quite proficient in handling the fire demon. No, she's gotten a lot stronger. Yi Jin Jin is here too. Is that really Yi Jin Jin? They saw Yi Jin Jin throw all manner of throwing projectiles, as well as her flame, to burn countless enemies to a crisp. They knew that she, under Shin Woo's request, had become stronger, but this was a bit too much, wasn't it? Everyone who's involved with Shin Woo goes through an extreme change. Kook, that goes for you too, Lloyd. You grew substantially, mentally and physically. Arian, hey, you can talk about sex later. Focus on the battle for now. Sex. Lloyd and Arian had a good thing going there, but Kracia, who was quietly casting, coldly interjected. Their job was to protect Kracia until she was finished casting her spell. Everyone's changed a lot. Really, you haven't seen anything yet. You'll see, once we've mostly cleared out the Imperial Army. What happens then? Yi Jin Jin will show us soon. Kracia was telling the truth. Ultimately, countless undead had sacrificed themselves to kill Kuren von Begner. It was the Underground Empire's Imperial Army, of course. And once the squads led by the remaining 12 generals were destroyed, the undead forces pushed even harder, as if aware of their impending victory. Damn it, these undead never tire, do they? We'll be pushed back at this rate. I'm glad that despicable Begner was killed, but at this rate, everyone will. Please don't worry, everyone. What dramatic timing. No, that was a lie. Shin Woo had picked that timing to make it look dramatic. The hero, Izuna, raised her spear and stepped forward. We have allies that will help us. Allies? Are you referring to that volunteer army? They're helpful, yes, but that's not enough to turn the tide. Oh, spirits. At this point in time, a long speech would be pointless. There was something far greater. Feats and results. Once Yi Jin Jin yelled, a giant gate appeared in the center of the battlefield. It was the gate that connected the surface to the spirit's spring. The spirit princess and now the immortal princess, Dana, stepped out of the gate. Her beauty caused the forces to lose all focus and look at her in awe. However, she hadn't come here for people to marvel at her appearance. Oh, spirits, the beautiful and powerful immortal princess, Dana, recited her script as politely as possible. The humans require our aid. These heinous ghosts are dirtying the surface. This land, which is both our base and our place to live. Ah, it smells like the curse. This disgusting smell, which seeks to bring everything to death. Spirits, it's our turn now. It's time for us, as residents of this world, to drive out the curse. Yoo. Though the spirits were somewhat awkward, they nonetheless stuck to their lines. Of course, if one looked at them closely, their awkwardness would show, but because they had appeared when the surface needed them most, it was almost as if God had sent them to aid them. Ooh, the spirits have come to aid us. The hero, Izuna, brought the spirits here to save us. Lady Izuna, the spirit queen, they fell for it. A few well-placed individuals yelled out, establishing the mood. It was super effective. Not only were there more and more individuals that yelled Izuna's name, but they were starting to call Dana the spirit queen. Zenon, am I finally able to show myself? It was perfect timing. No, it was even better. Zenon, who quietly resided within Yi Jin Jin's dress, materialized himself. At that moment, her magic increased even further. Her magic was strong enough by just wearing the dress, but by materializing, Zenon increased Yi Jin's power even further. Indeed, the spirits have forgiven our past transgressions and have decided to help us. We can definitely overcome this hurdle. Together with the spirits. That must be what Sir Kay wished for as well. You, as humans, won't lose to the likes of you. The spirits came back for us. Ah, God is smiling down at us. Praise be the sun. Their confidence soared as if they had become religious zealots. The madness of the battleground must have permeated into their brains. If it hadn't, then the surface dwellers, who had been taught to hate the spirits, wouldn't so easily accept the spirits. However, that was exactly what Shin Woo had been aiming for. We won't lose. We will retake the surface. The Emperor's not at fault. He has always struggled to keep his people alive. The spirits are no exception. Then why did you try killing us for so long? The mood had shifted entirely in the humans' favor. The undead couldn't win anymore. This part was critical. They needed to kill the undead, sure, but they couldn't afford to kill the heaven-defying general's troops as well. Now they had to gradually play dead and retreat. It would prove to be incredibly complicated, but Shin Woo had already prepared everything in advance. Dana, who'd appeared with such excellent timing, had been assigned a task that was just as important. Allowing the hero's forces to escape. Using the spirit's spring. The hero is definitely a genius, Dana inwardly muttered. The spirits would appear at a critical moment, drawing everyone's attention. And then, the heaven-defying general's troops would quietly retreat. No matter how she thought about it, it wasn't an idea that could be put together by a human. As expected, he was indeed the chosen hero. However, when everything was falling into place. Dana tilted her head at the voice that resounded throughout the battlefield. She wasn't the only one. Everyone on the battlefield heard that magical voice, forcing them to give up on the battle and focus entirely on the voice. Shoot! The voice gradually became clearer, and loudly resounded throughout the battlefield. Don't shoot, and soon, everyone could hear it. Dana marveled its contents and the voice itself. What exactly was happening? Why was he personally intervening now? However, it was definitely him. Shin Woo, who had overturned all logic and had created this stage, was yelling. Stop, friendly fire. All of you, stop fighting. The battlefield froze. The sky and the ground were both shining. She didn't know what was happening, but she was sure of one thing, he was overturning all cause and effect. What is this? Dana muttered vacantly and raised her hand. And she soon realized, everyone else was undergoing the same evolution that she had. The humans, the undead, and the spirits, they all obeyed his will. Seeing that, Dana just laughed despondently. She really had no choice. If you're all ready, then look and realize. Everyone watched and experienced the world's changes, and bowed before the god in front of them in worship. A god was performing a miracle.